Welcome to episode 14 of Northern Lights, the online chat show which focuses on football in the north and northeast of Scotland. My name is Martin Johnston, and each week I'm joined by our resident journalist and fellow Rothes loon, Dave Edwards. Also joining Dave and I each week are three well-known names from North football, both from the past and the present. Just a few guys reminiscing about the good old days and from time to time giving a distanced opinion on the modern game. A bit like Soccer AM meets the Antiques Roadshow. In this week's show, we will be referencing Rothes, Keith, Huntly, Peterhead, and a host of other clubs into the bargain. Our first guest was a member of that historic three-in-a-row title-winning team at the end of the 70s and early 1980s. John Curran's first Highland League club was Rothes, and he spent 3 seasons at McKissick Park before joining Keith. John would spend 9 seasons at Kynoch Park, where he collected an array of winners' medals, including 3 Highland League Championship medals under the guidance of Bobby Wilson. Welcome to the show, John Curran.
Thank you, Martin.
John, lovely to see you.
Thank you, Dave. Nice to see you again.
Good man. Some may say you were the Ted McMinn of Highland League football, being a very tall, lanky, but very skillful winger, John.
Tell me, David, have you been speaking to Wally Lawson by any chance?
No, not at all. I just thought about that myself the other day. I thought you had the same sort of look about you.
Yeah, well, Wally often says that to me. I played off against him quite a few times. He says, Ted McMinn, because I just never knew what you were going to do. Okay. I've got news for you, Wally. I had no idea. We're on the same page there.
Now, John, are you still a retired solicitor, am I right?
I am retired from the law, that's correct.
That's right. Well, I played with 1 or 2 solicitors in my time, including yourself, but also the likes of Davy Lottie, Gordon Buchan, Mike Murchie, a pal of mine. So you must have been one hell of a 5-a-side solicitors team in Aberdeen.
I have a side story to tell you. It involves a couple of these guys. I didn't actually play 5-a-sides with them. I played against them. The Gordon Buchan and I played in the same 5-a-side team, but only after we retired. But Doug Davidson played with us, Duncan Davidson, Jim Bett, Willie Miller even, and he was hopeless. but that was in our later years, I would put it, David.
Great stuff. John will elaborate more on all these things in a wee while, but welcome to the show. It's lovely to see you.
And you, David. Thank you.
Our second guest holds the record for being the youngest player ever to have played in the Highland League at the age of 14 years, 123 days. Nat Porter started his love affair with Peterhead FC as far back as 1973, and he has spent almost 30 years with the Blue Toon in various capacities. As a player, Nat also picked up an array of silverware for his hometown team, but it took almost 16 seasons before he got his hands on a Highland League winners' medal. Nat remains Balmoor Stadium, where he is currently the club's community liaison officer. A very warm welcome to my friend, work colleague, and Blue Toon legend, Natty Porter.
Thanks very much, Martin. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you guys and seeing Pelly and John Curran again.
Lovely to see you, Natty. And may I say, looking so well, because I know you've not been all that well in recent past, but you've made a miraculous recovery and you're looking extremely well, my friend.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. It's a bit of a torrid time with the COVID, but feeling a bit better now. I've picked up deep vein thrombosis, would you believe? And I'm now recovering from that. So I'm getting there, though. I'm getting a game of golf anyway, Dave.
Good stuff, Natty. Good stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, you were an excellent footballer, but I believe in your younger days, you might even have been an actor, because I know you've got a huge credit to your name. You appeared in Play for Today as a young man.
That's right. Play for Today, Donald and Sally, and it was Gregor Fisher, Rob C. Nesbitt, Gerard Kelly, was in it. I had a role that lasted about 4.5 seconds, so I didn't quite make the credits, Dave, but I got paid 15 quid for it, so that was a good bit.
A lot of money in them days, Natty.
15 quid came in handy.
Well, we will develop that later on. Welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here.
Thanks, Dave.
Our third and final guest this week really needs no introduction whatsoever, especially when Natty just said he had seen him on the screen. Steve Pelly Paterson went from Nairn County as a youngster to Manchester United, where he would spend 5 seasons and make his debut against Ajax in a European Cup fixture at Old Trafford. Injury would see Pele and his Man United career, Pele end his Man United career in 1980, and he went on to have spells with numerous clubs throughout the world, including being the first European player to play in Japan when he joined Yomiuri. As a manager, Pele would take charge at a number of clubs, but he will always be remembered as the man who started the Huntly Revolution, and that headline with Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Super Pele, we're delighted that you could come and join us. Welcome, Steve Pelly Paterson.
Thanks very much, Martin. And Davey, nice to see you both. Had a lot of dealings with both of you over the years, and nice to see you again. Good to see Natty and John as well. So apologies for me being a little bit, how would I put it, caveman-esque, trying to get us the first Zoom, whatever podcast, whatever you want to call it, I've ever been on, and it shows. Took me a wee while to get connected, but we got there. So no, looking forward to getting the news with everybody. Last of the time in this, serious sort of time we're all going through,
Appreciate your efforts, Pele. Obviously, your circumstances have changed slightly tonight. You weren't supposed to be working, but as always, you've been called in, dedicated to the cause. So we all appreciate that. You might have to scoot off at some point, but hopefully that's not the case. Fingers crossed. Worst case scenario, somebody could lock you in the room and we've got you for the next hour and a half. But welcome to the show anyway.
Nice to see you, Pelly. And I'll tell you, I'm really envious of your beard because it makes my moustache look like an eyebrow coming down for a drink.
Well, just a bit of fun in lockdown.
Good man. We first met, and Martin didn't mention this because your first club, if I remember rightly, and we played against each other, Pelly, when I was at Rothes Decimals, and you were with Bishopmill United, along with people like Dougie Well and Mikey Law, people like that. Am I right?
That's right. I think I was 14. That would have been roughly about 1972. Yeah. Bishopmill United was my first up after Elgin Boys League. It was the kind of first official 11-a-side kind of Scottish affiliated football I played. Yeah, I remember at Decimals. My brother-in-law Don Macaulay was manager and has some great memories for that time.
Yeah, happy days, Pele. We'll maybe elaborate on that in the near future, but it's an absolute delight to have you on the show, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Dave.
Dave, I think we're possibly boring the viewers if we keep telling what the viewing figures are, but they've been going through the roof. Our averages are fantastic. Now, have you any shout-outs for us this week?
I have. Well, a couple of shout-outs from people that got my head scratcher correct. I was accused of making it far too easy. But... Of
course, to be fair, Dave, you didn't know who our guests were going to be on this week's show. Well, before you said head scratcher, but maybe when one of our guests could answer the question for you.
Maybe he could answer the question. Two people that did get it right are Steve Shorten, that local cricket aficionado from Keith, plays for Huntly, of course, cricket, and one of our guests from last week, Martin Stewart, who pinged in the answer quite quickly after he came off here last week. But Pelly, maybe you can answer the question. The question was, you were the first European player to play in Japanese football, but you were also signed for the second time by a footballing legendary manager when he signed you for Sydney Olympic. And part of your duties was not only playing football for him, but as a babysitter for him and his wife as well. What was that legendary manager's name?
Tommy Docherty.
That's the one. You got it in one. Tommy Docherty was the answer.
Funniest man I ever played under. Fantastic. Great laugh.
And a good manager, Pelly.
Yeah, he's still kicking on. I think Doc's about 96 or something, and still living down near Manchester. But no, I had some fantastic times with him.
I remember you came and had breakfast. We were doing a dinner one night with the Doc in Mossymouth, in the hotel in Mossymouth, and you came and joined me and him for breakfast.
I remember that. Yeah, yep.
Yeah. He had a lot of good things to say about you, Pelly.
Yeah, well, like I said, me and him going really well, and I was grateful. He obviously signed me for Man United, and then I think it was in would it have been 1983? I think I went to Sydney and played a season for him at Sydney Olympic, and then I got a really good move to the Yomiuri in Japan off the back of that. So, but I remember I used to pick up Tommy Doc. I'd actually had a pink Beetle that I used to spin about Sydney, and I used to pick a Doc up to go to training, which was quite amusing. Me and him in the pink Beetle. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll elaborate on that, Bell. Thanks for that.
I could probably predict, Dave, there will be lots of questions this week, because there was the last time you appeared in the same attire as you have tonight. And the question that we were being asked is, did Dave win his darts match at the Lakeside?
Very good, Martin. Very good. Very good.
On this day, Dave?
On this day? On this day. I think you got on this day for this time.
I have indeed. I had real difficulty finding a news story for the 23rd of July. We've gone back to 1977. And the big story in the Highland League, or the biggest story we could find, was that Inverness CT and Inverness Thistle had put their heads together, and they had agreed to raise the terracing admission, wait for it, from 10 pence to 40 pence for the new season. And it was creating absolute outrage in the city of Inverness, especially because Clach said, we'll just keep it at 10 pence. And so, I don't know, 10 pence doesn't buy half that much these days. But that was a big story then. But what I did find was, from a refereeing background, there had been a couple of promotions in refereeing circles, and you'll recognise some of these names. And the newspaper report basically said, looking ahead to the new football season are two Aberdeen referees who have gained promotion to a higher grade. Bill Crichton has been promoted from Class 3A to Class 2, which he means that he can now referee Scottish Reserve fixtures. And another name, Peter Watson from Aberdeen, former East End player. He'd been upgraded from Class 3A from the junior ranks, and that meant he could then act as a linesman in all senior games as well as take charge of Highland League games. And Peter's ambition was to progress to Class 2 at some point, which he did. When I started out, Peter was a fairly prominent Class 2 referee. So it's a couple of blasts from the past in that respect. Bill Crichton was a very graceful referee, if I recall. He seemed to just glide across the park. But maybe Natty and John have more recollection of these guys and how they performed. These guys were my mentors as a youngster. Bill latterly was a supervisor when I was pursuing my refereeing career. Peter Watson was very much a colleague, and I gained a lot of experience from him as he was a Class 2 and I would be going to sunny Arbroath and Montrose on a Monday night for reserve games. But certainly two blasts for the past. Any recollections of these guys, gents?
Did Bill Crichton not go on to be secretary of Bankery Golf Club for decades, for many, many years, I think?
I'm near golfer, but I suspect you're probably right. Bill's from Bankery, so that could possibly be right.
A good referee, big, tall, languid style, as you say, Martin.
Yes, indeed. Very, very elegant. She just seemed to glide across the park with ease. Near like myself, as a thundering, heavy-footed pillock. John, can I kick things off by asking you about your early years in football, leading up to what we would class as your senior career.
Yeah.
We had Dennis Darcy on a couple of weeks ago, speaking about how unusual it was for someone to progress in football, having come from a rugby school.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for yourself. Is that correct?
Absolutely. But if I may, Martin,
Yep.
before I actually address your question, if I can explain the waistcoat and the Keith tie, it is not for purposes of winding you lot up, or indeed Forbes Shand for once. It is out of respect for Alec Rutherford of Keith, who died within the last week. Alec, or young Alec as I call him, meant a lot to me. He was club secretary when Keith signed me. But even more so, his dad, old Alec, was a president when my dad signed for Keith. So with those two gone, it just seems to me to be, it's like not only the end of an era, but the end of a dynasty. And it's ironic, the last time I spoke to young Alec was at the funeral of Sandy Stables. And to lose these guys within a couple of years, it's terrible. So that's hence the tie and a waistcoat, because he's a Keith boy and he loved these waistcoats, did Aki. Right, that's your question now, if I may. You're right. I suppose though, and I'll talk about Dennis later on, but coming from my background, and particularly the male line, say the male line of my family is steeped, if I can use that word, in the FIPA. We go back to my granda, who played for a Philadelphian team in the 1920s, and I've only just discovered that lately. My dad and his brother Edward both played senior football in the 40s and 60s, and I'll be talking about my dad more later on. So for me, until I went to the grammar, the only sport I was interested in was football. My dad, JC Senior, he was probably one of the first accredited SFA coaches. When he returned from England to Aberdeen, I would have been 7 or 8. His final club was Watford. And everybody seemed to think that, you know, spending time in the house with an SFA accredited coach, it must have been coaching. That's not my recollection. My recollection is he gave me one bit of coaching. It was fantastic and it was intense. He made me kick with my left foot. He wouldn't have let me kick in the back garden with my right foot. And I can hear his mantra to this day: learn to kick with both feet, son, you'll aye get a game. And so it proved. My debut for Inchgarth Primary, as a result of all this left foot coaching, was in March 1961. I just turned 10, and I made my debut as a right back. Right? Having said that, I spent the rest of my career, such as it was, on the left-hand side. And he's right. If you can kick with bare feet, what an advantage it is. So, I had a couple of games at right back for Inchgarth Primary School, and then I was turned into a left half, a position unknown to the modern footballer. That means I took the shies on the left-hand side of the park. A shy is a word unknown to the modern footballer as well. It was at left half that I was picked for the 1962 primary select in Aberdeen to play in the Wilson Trophy. And it's interesting, getting back to your introduction, Martin, 4 of that team actually went to the grammar later. The team also included Joe Cruikshank, who I don't know if any of you guys remember, but he signed for Chelsea. Dennis Darcy was in the team. It also included centre forward, free scoring centre forward called Robin Gray, and the centre half was a Stuart Clark. I met up with both of these players later in my career, but both of them had turned into goalies. Robin Gray turned into Bobby Gray of Keith, and Stuart Bappy Clark was, I think, succeeded Dave Lottie in goals at Elgin. And interesting, centre forwards don't normally become goalies, or do they, Dave? I don't know.
Not normally, John, no.
No. So we reached the semis and a primary select team. We got knocked out by Glasgow schools on the playing pitches of Shotts Bonaccord. I must have played a stormer. I say that because I was sent a report in the match by a journalist, believe it or not, for the Daily Worker. The journalist's name was Jock Curran. It's purely a coincidence that my granddad was also called Jock Curran, and he was a journalist for the Daily Worker. It's an amazing coincidence. And I say, honest, trust me, I'm a lawyer. So then we come to your point, Aberdeen Grammar. Totally rugby playing school. In my view, a hugely snobbish attitude towards the Roon Bar. I'd passed my 11 plus. I was reluctant to go to the grammar because there was no football. I'm not saying my dad was reluctant, but he didn't give me great encouragement to go. My mother, who was the one that really counted, gave herself 3 votes. So I went to grammar. I'll never forget, and I tell this story a lot. First day, they called it games in the games hall. The games master said to the assembled first year, stand up, anyone who played for the Aberdeen Primary Select or any other team's Primary Select at football. So me and a couple of other guys stood up. I'm starting to get optimistic. This isn't sounding too bad. And especially when I heard his next question, which was, anyone who played for their primary team, please stand up. And a whole pile of boys then stood up. I'm really optimistic by this stage. He then says, right, that's the first practice at rugby. Now, I've used that story over the years, especially in arguments with rugby types, as to which is the most skillful code. And I say, well, it seems to me from that football players can play and probably excel at rugby. My own observation is that the reverse is certainly not the case. But I then played rugby for Aberdeen Grammar School between the age of 11 to 16. I called it I call them the wilderness years because no football. And rugby, it was okay, but I didn't particularly like it. So 16, a pal of mine at school, a guy called Jim Stevens. He was involved with the lads club. I played for the lads club, and he took me along to the lads club. And I signed for ALC Thistle in the youth league at age 16 as an inside left. Now one of these positions that will be unknown to the modern footballer. In one of my early games for them, I think we won about 5-2 or something this game. I can't remember who we were playing, but I scored 4 goals. And there was unbeknownst to me, a selector for the North Scottish Schoolboys international team there. So I got a trial, and that was big news at school, and the reaction was very much like Martin's introduction. How on earth can this boy who plays rugby end up getting a trial? I didn't make the team, by the way. I think the trials, I made the final trial. I think they were at Nairn. I didn't make the team, but it sort of gave me some confidence that I could maybe still play the game a wee bit. that was the schoolboy, and I was only Aberdeen schoolboy. It was up at those trials, but as I say, I didn't get in the team. Before I move on to do you want me to talk about the university football?
Yes, indeed, because I'm very interested in the controversy of what you achieved at the university and the failure to recognise your achievements.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was quite democratic in the sense that first year, that's your fresher year, but of course there's about 300 boys in the fresher year, and they had what they called fresher trials, and that's where the democracy comes in. You all played under the watchful eye of one Tudor Hale, who some of you may remember. I think did he not manage Elgin at one stage briefly? But anyway, Tudor Hale, he was a good coach, but there were university firsts, there was university seconds, university thirds, and the strollers, right? You didn't want to be in the strollers. I discovered early on that the university firsts were what I would call career students. These guys were about 23, 24. They'd been at university for about 6 years, just perpetually. They were a bit of a clique, an elite. They didn't like outsiders breaking in. They'd all been together for years. Anyway, I did quite well in the fresher trials in the sense that I got into the seconds. I scored a few goals for the seconds and only played about 3 games for them, and was promoted to the firsts. I didn't particularly enjoy that because, as I've said, I was regarded as a bit of an outsider. I'd taken one of their mates' places in the team. I'm not saying they ignored me, but it didn't exactly make me feel welcome. And so and before the end of that season, I think it was, I signed for Rothes. But I had a huge abiding memory of playing for the university firsts. Well, I think it was either my last or one of my last games, playing for the university firsts against Inverness CT at King's College pitches in the qualifying cup. I think it was the second round. I must have parked this at the back of my mind without leaving the engine running. So I had vague notions that we got a bit of a doing. But I couldn't believe that because my recollection, that university team was top of the first division amateurs, you know, when I played in it, which is quite a hard league. And I thought, this isn't a bad team. I got in touch with Inverness Highland League historian Ian Davidson, Roddy's brother. I got in touch with him.
Yep.
He came back within 30 seconds, says, it was a hammering. 10-1 to the Pelly. 4 goals from Dave Johnston, 2 goals from Freddie Neild, and one goal from Chick Allen, the late Chick Allen. You know, so it was a right doing. But what you're getting at is that university team won. The big competition, Scottish universities, was the Queen's Park Shield, and we won it. But the presentation of the medals didn't come till later, and by that stage I had signed for Rothes. I mean, I'm still at university for 2 years after that. I never got my medal. So about 10 years later at a university reunion, one of my teammates handed it over to me. The best explanation I got from him was it was this old amateur oblique professional snobbery thing. In other words, I got up to Rothes. The irony of that was that when I was at Rothes, I was an amateur. I signed amateur forms for Rothes. That was the first irony. The second irony was, within a season or two, at least 3 of my teammates had signed professional forms in the Highland League. I mean, I won't name them, but that for me summed up the attitude that they had. I had happier memories, and I'll get back to Dave's question, much happier memories of 5-a-sides there. They had an Aberdeen University 5-a-side competition, and the team I was in won it. This is later on, maybe my second year or third year. But the team I was in was me. By that stage, I was playing for Rothes, and 4 rugby players, all from the grammar. and we won it. And we beat, in the final of the Aberdeen University five-a-sides, a team that included Gordon Buchan and Doug Davidson. You may remember him, played with Elgin. In other words, it was a FITBA team that we beat in the final. And it happened to coincide, or win, with the inaugural Aberdeen University, Scottish University five-a-sides, the first time we held. We assumed that we'd be going down, representing Aberdeen. The guy who'd taken over from Tudor Hill at that stage, a guy called Peter Clark, he was not impressed by the fact that me and four rugby players had beaten the better football playing team, as he would see it, and tried to persuade me to join Doug and Gordon Buchan, and that sort of merged team would represent Aberdeen University. I told him to take a hike, and that it was a matter of pure logic that the team that won the Aberdeen competition should represent Aberdeen University at the national five-a-sides. They reluctantly conceded that point. We went down and we won the inaugural five-a-side team. I was delighted to come back and show the medal to Mr. Peter Clark, I've got to say. Now, those of you who've been listening to me may say, well, John, that gives a lie to your original point, that FITBA players can play rugby, but that the reverse is not the case. I say stuff and nonsense. That was the exception that proves my rule, number one. Number two, as you all know, five-a-sides isn't a real FITBA. My original submission. And I think that's takes me to just about up to the Rothes years, which comes later.
Great stuff, John. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, it would appear we've lost Pelly temporarily.
You going?
He's, I don't know if he's lost power, he's got a bit of kettle on, or he's got a crisis. But we'll hopefully we'll get him back. Over to you, Dave.
He's on his way back, but look at it.
I see that, right?
Natty.
Hi, Dave.
Can I take you back to 1972? Now, Willie Miller had just left Peterhead after his on loan spell, and it was 1973 actually. 1972 it was, and earlier that year I'd played against Willie Miller, making my debut for Rothes. He scored both goals in a 2-0 win for Peterhead at Recreation Park. But just as Willie Miller left, a new kid came in the block, and later on made his debut as the youngest ever player to play Highland League football, and that was none other than young Natty Porter. Natty, tell us about that.
Well, that's right, Dave. I remember Willie Miller and Andy Kerr coming to the club, because I used to go up and watch the games with Peterhead. And I remember Andy Kerr probably being the better prospect at the time, but there you go. Willie Miller was always very, very professional. He came as a striker, did really, really well for us. But the next year I got an opportunity with the school teacher, Ian Buchanan, run the team, and he always liked me as a footballer. He always called people by their proper names, so it was always Nathaniel. So on that day, he says, Nathaniel, you go home and ask your mother if she'll allow you to come up to Keith to play for Peterhead tonight. So my memory, my recollection is I didn't go and ask my mum at all. I just, I wasn't got a chance, the fact that she might say no. So up I goes to Keith. We got beat 3-2. And a memory of mine, sadly, of that game was at the end of the game, you got a little miniature of bells. It was a bells cup time. And I'm in the bus, and I said to the school teacher, I says, I've got this miniature of bells. And he says, Nathaniel, you keep that as a memento. At that point, Brian Third came into the bus. He took the miniature, finished it very quickly, gave me the empty bottle back, and says, Natty, keep that as a memento, son. So that was my memory that game. But no, man, it was a great experience to be up with these guys. It was the likes of Charlie Duncan, Ali Christie, guys like that. It was just fantastic. So after that, I went back to Buckhaven Hearts under a guy, Patty Duncan. Played with Peterhead and Falkirk, and that was a good grounding for me. It was really good. And I was always encouraged people to go back and play junior, even at a young age. I think I'm at one with guys like Jim McInally there, where I think youngsters should be playing against the Mannies, as it were, at a young age, and it doesn't do them any harm at all. And it certainly teaches them how to protect themselves. So that was me with Buckingham Hearts for a couple of years, really enjoyed it. And then Colin Grant was a guy who took me back to Peterhead. I'd always been training with him, but he took me and signed me in a proper form, as it were, for Peterhead. 8, 10 and 12 pounds was the signing on, or the wages, should I say. 12 pound for a win, 10 pound for a draw, and 8 pound for a defeat back in 1977. And I played with a lot of great players. I was just so fortunate. Ali Christie, Rex Hunter, Charlie Duncan, of course, the great John Siveright, the legend that is John Siveright. Willie Lawson, fantastic player, Willie. John spoke about him earlier on. Willie was just, he got a reputation as being a bit of a hard man, Willie, actually. But I always respected him as a great footballer. He was a fantastic footballer, Willie, and a really good servant for Peterhead. He was, his best mate, of course, was Frank Krakowski. Frank played in that same team. And you were asking some stories about referees, Martin. One good one about Frank. Surprise, surprise, it's a referee story with Frank, eh? But it was back in the good old days where a booking was a booking, where they took down your name. And a guy played for Brora called Stan Sokolowski. And Frank and Stan started really punching each other in the middle of the park. And it ended up that the referee went up and says, what's your name? Says, Frank Krakowski. And your name? Stan Sokolowski. Says, right, settle down, boys. Next time you're both in the I don't think he fancied spelling any of them. Also in that team was guys like Jim Taylor, Sandy Rennie, Falky Andrews and Graham Masson just came for Cumminston at that point. Jim Hamilton was in the go. And of course, a great partnership, Raymond O'Hara and Hadley, Gordon McIntyre. So little and large as it were, a great striking partnership. But the guy who signed me, Colin Grant, I've got to give him tremendous praise. He changed Peterhead from a middle of the league team. When he came up from Chelmsford, I think Colin came from, it was then that Peterhead started really to win things and really have ambition of winning league titles and winning trophies. I came in right at the start of that, so I was really, really fortunate. And Colin was always fantastic to me, always fantastic. In fact, it was him who orchestrated a trial to Dundee United. His wife, I don't know if you know, but his wife, Joy, her name's Joy Capel, so the sister of Frank Capel, Dundee United. So I managed to get my trial down at Dundee United, which was a marvellous experience again, along with the Hegartys and Naries and Paul Sturrock, a lot of these guys. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite good enough, so back to Peterhead I came, and then it was on to the late 70s and early 80s, but I think we'll speak a bit more about them later. And maybe we'll tell you one story about a lot of people know him. Sadly, he's not with us now, Falky Andrews from Foggy. He was a tremendous fullback, and but the problem with Falky is he got in tremendous positions, but he maybe didn't have the best of deliveries. So one night at training, Ali Christie and Rex Hunter would be in the middle. Colin Grant would lay the ball to me. I would lay it off to Falky. He would be in that area, cross it over. First one happens, lays the ball off to Falky. He stops right in his tracks and says, my goodness, how's this going to help my confidence? And Ali Christie and Rex Hunter were sitting on the dike behind the goals and just shouting at Falky, this is where the ball normally comes on a Saturday, so that's where we're coming tonight. So poor Falky's confidence was kind of shattered with these two guys sitting in the dike behind the goals. But a great bunch of guys, and we won the qualifying cup and Aberdeenshire Cup in my first full season. And just great memories. A lot of these guys. A lot of them still friends just now. And I must say that through my recent illness, a lot of these guys, even though they haven't been in touch with me for 10, 15 years, got in touch to see how I was doing. So great mates of mine, and I was so fortunate to come into that team. Another one, just before I sign off on this era, as it were, was one of my first games, proper games, was against Jim Gerrard. Now, as all know, Jim Gerrard, one of his legs was bigger than me at the time. And I was skipping past him. Jim maybe was a little bit past his sell-by date, and I was a young winger, and he threatened me to inflict some serious injury on me should I go past him again. That's not his exact words, but I think you know what I mean. And Ali Christie came across and says, Jim, is that what you're on to now? You're picking in young 60-year-olds. And he had a little pop with him, and Ali Christie took him away from me. So that's the kind of players I was brought up with, guys who looked after me really well. So very fortunate, very fortunate.
One of your ex-teammates you mentioned in that little summation you made there, Natty, was, I was speaking to him on Saturday after a game of golf at Duffhouse Royal, and I told him you were coming on the show this week. He says, please tell Natty I was asking for him. That was a very young Graham Masson.
Yeah.
Graham player, played Highland League football, plays mid-40s.
Graham came to us for Cummington, and he was one of the best destroyers, I would call him, in the middle of the park. He went on to be a sweeper, but I would say to him, he thought he was a sweeper, but he was a great destroyer in the middle of the park. And that time, teams had, like Ian Molson, who went down to Elgin. Kevin McDonald was at Cali, great player. Donald Mackay played for Brura. And, you know, Graham Masson would do a great job in any of them in a man marking role. A super player. And a nice guy as well, Graham. A nice guy.
Yeah, Banff-based builder, of course, but he played a long time at Lossiemouth at the end of his career as well, Natty. Yeah,
he played. It didn't surprise me. He played an old age, as it were, a good age, because he always looked after himself, Graham. He was always very, very fit. Always very, very fit. So he did well. He went to Elgin as well, I think, Dave, was he?
He did at Elgin. And he looks as fit as a flea at the moment as well. Very slim, and he looks like he can still play, actually.
Is that right? Is he a golfer?
He's a golfer. He's like me. He's not a very good golfer, but he enjoys it, just like me. Natty, one character I'd like to mention as well during your time, and I imagine he was chairman, because he was chairman for a whole dynasty, is the late, great Robbie Warner.
Robbie came a bit later, actually, but the club was in trouble in '84, I think it was, and Robbie came in and saved the day. But, oh man, I'd be here all night if I told you stories about Robbie Warner. One I can think of just now is Aberdeen University didn't pay their pound, and they got put out of the Aberdeenshire Cup. The next season, would you believe, Aberdeen didn't pay their pound, and there was a meeting held to see if they'd be allowed into the cup. And Ian Taggart and Alec Ferguson came up to the meeting. The big guns came up, and Alec Ferguson stood up for 5-10 minutes to tell them, everybody, how important the Aberdeenshire Cup was to Aberdeen, how vital it was to them and everything. And then Robbie stood up and says, I hope you're driving, Mr. Taggart, because the rubbish this man's been speaking the last 5 minutes. I hope he's not driving. So that was Robbie. He wouldn't be scared at anybody. He always knew what he was thinking, that was for sure.
That's for sure. And Robbie didn't suffer fools gladly, did he?
Not at all. Not at all.
Natty, thanks for that. Now, I'm going to move on to have a chat with John, because Pele is either away on a social working crisis, or he's having a wee bit of difficulty getting back. So, John, we're going to move on a little bit, and we're going to look at the Curran dynasty. Now, I am old enough to watch your dad, John Curran, play for Keith, and what a player he was in goal for Keith. I remember Jimmy Woodcock in front of him. It was a great, really strong Eric Wilson, I think, was about at the time as well, at fullback. A really, really strong Keith lineup at that time. But before that, your granddad Jock was a professional footballer, and as you say, you recently found out involved in America, in Philadelphia.
Correct. Yeah, and it's one of my lifetime regrets that I only found out about this it was during lockdown, start of lockdown, because I would have had every opportunity to speak to my granddad about it, because he didn't die till I was 21. But it's the usual, I suppose we're all the same at that age, more interested in ourselves than stories from our grandparents, etc. And the story has led, or is likely to lead, to the, I'll call it a book, that I'm collaborating with 4 other people on. I won't go into that, but Granda Jock is the inspiration. And my story about him starts with my cousin David, who's a Glasgow taxi driver, and he's the son of my dad's brother Edward, who also played football. David was in March, April, clearing out his flat in Glasgow. He was moving. And he phoned me up to say, would you be in? I've got a letter here you might be interested in. I said, well, what is it? It's a letter to our Granda Jock. Said, well, why would I be interested, David? He says, well, it's dated 23rd November 1923. It's from a Mr. David Brooke, who is the manager of, wait for it, the Philadelphia Soccer Football Club. And it's the letter advising Granda Jock as to a change in the travelling arrangement for a match the following Saturday. I said, yeah, please send that letter up to me right away, which he did. Because that letter provoked memories of a chat I'd had with my grandma, Jock's wife. Jock had died. I suppose, if you'll forgive me, she, the family would say she was doolally at the time. We would now say...
It's a medical term, John.
Yes, yes. She was suffering from Alzheimer's. I don't think that existed at the time I'm talking about. Anyway, I was sitting with my grandma, Liz, in her flat in Dixon Road, Glasgow. And it became abundantly apparent, just the 2 of us, but it became abundantly apparent to me that she thought she was talking to my dad. But again, it's doolally grandma. So I didn't correct her and she turned to me and she said, you know, you're lucky to be Scottish. I said, well, why is that, grandma? And she says, well, the boat only docked 2 weeks before you were born. So having investigated that further, the story was that Granda Jock, having returned from the trenches, hasn't had enough excitement. Marries a young Grandma Liz, buggers off, no flights or anything, a 6-week boat journey to Philadelphia to sign professional forms for a team that played soccer, not football. Philadelphia Soccer Football Club is how it was called. Unbelievable stuff. And what brought him back was that he played for 2 seasons, but before the end of his 2nd season, my grandma had fallen pregnant with my dad, because there was no such thing as scans and finding out the gender of the baby and all that then. So Jock decided that if it was going to be a boy, he was going to be eligible to play for Scotland. So that's why he came back. But as I say, no flights. It was an Atlantic crossing, a mad dash, a race against time. And that brings me to what my grandma said, they made it by 2 weeks. But that intrigued me. So, gee, there's nobody to tell me the story here. So I want to, and I have avoided Facebook all my life. I joined Facebook because I was invited onto the Legends site, Martin, which you'll know about, and I was quite keen to do that. So I just posted on Facebook that story I've just told you, along with a Granda Jock letter and a picture of Granda Jock in his Royal Scots uniform. And the response was absolutely amazing, including a response from a Philadelphian journalist called Ed Farnsworth. He's a bit of an amateur football historian and just totally proud of football in that era in Philadelphia. For me, maybe like yourselves, I mean, I think about, if I say American football first time round, I'm thinking New York Cosmos in 1976 with Pele playing for them. Not this Pele, the other one. But this whole notion of a professional football league in 1923 in America, and a guy coming out the trenches and going over there and signing pro forms, blew me away. So Farnsworth, this Philadelphian journalist, I mean, no charge or anything, just because he's dead keen in it, he did some research, and I've got some facts which blew me away, actually. He came back with just a mountain of material. Every game at my granda played for a Philadelphia football soccer team, pictures, travelling arrangements, everything. And also some details of what was called the ASL, the American Soccer League. After the Great War, Scottish and English pros were breaking contracts here to get over there, because the average wage was $900 per week, in today's terms. But there was also great. There were all the teams were backed by big industrialists, so there was always little jobs and extra money on the side as well. But I mean, you just couldn't get that money in Scotland or England. The talent drain was so bad that in 1925 the Scottish FA had a special meeting. On the agenda was the American Menace, or the American Triangle, that's what it was called. They sent letters across there complaining about the drain in talent. They were all going over there. So it was all news to me and just tremendously interesting. Now the letter that sparked off my interest, Farnsworth tells me, referred to a cup tie against a team called Bethlehem Steel, who won 5-0, by the way. They were the most successful soccer team in the US in the 1910s and 1920s. And they're regularly stacked with talent imported from Scotland. Granda Jock played inside left. He also told me he scored in his debut, which I was delighted to hear, a 2-1 win. And the trouble then, they were away for 4 days to play a match. You know, it was just in 1923, unbelievable. And he played his last game in January 1924. If you're working it out, my grandma was 3 months pregnant, and he managed to get home. I haven't looked into the detail of that journey, but that mad dash across the Atlantic meant that they made it by 2 weeks. So why regrets? As I say, it was 21. I wish my granddad was sitting here now to ask him not only about that, but I've got the picture I've got of him is he's age 17. It's dated 1914. He's in the uniform of the Royal Scots. He's obviously going away to the trenches for 4 or 5 years. And I say he survived, and to come back from that, and then, well, let's have some more excitement. Let's bugger off to America and play football or soccer. So it's just a tremendous story, I think. But I should have prized it all out of him, because what a tale he must have had to tell. And it's interesting, when he got back to Glasgow, he obviously had enough of the football, and he became variously an amateur naturalist, a red Clydesider. He was right in the heart of that. An amateur left-wing poet, and I'm happy to say I've got some of his verse, and it is left-wing, I can assure you. And a writer for the Daily Worker. And it's amazing that there were 2 Jock Currans there at the same time that day we played. And that's the Granda Jock. That's my Granda Jock story. I'm sorry, I jumped into your place there, Pelly. So that's me.
Your Granda Jock would have been in the States at the time of Prohibition. So it must have been strange times, really, to be. I mean, Pelly was the first European to play in Japan. Yeah. Your Granda Jock might have been one of the first UK people to play in American football.
Well, I think when the research has come back to me, and it's not my research, it's just journalist. I mean, I was blown away with the number of, I'm talking Scottish and English internationalists at that time who were breaking contracts and going over there and playing. So I doubt if he was the first, but he was amongst the first. Amongst the first, yeah. Just, it was trailblazing stuff, I think, David.
Yeah. Yeah. And later life, did he enjoy a little refreshment? Because I say it was a prohibition right in the middle of when he was there.
Now, he did not. My granda, unlike my dad and me, did not like a little refreshment. He liked his coffee. That was what he liked.
Coffee.
I remember.
That's an amazing tale, and we'll go on and explore the history of your dad, another great John Curran. But for the moment, it's back to Martin.
Thank you.
Pelly, welcome back.
Thank you. Technical hitch.
Technical hitch, but with the power of mobile phones, etc. Nobody can see me for here doing so. I'm sitting here desperately sending you text messages.
I'm running out of data. Absolutely eating my data.
Dave will sort out the expenses for that next week. He's a money man. Pelly, you mentioned Bishop Mill United, but I'd like you to tell us a wee bit about not just your time at Elgin Academy in Nairn County, but the one person that's also connected with the two.
Can I just jump in there steady? I went to Milnes High School, Fochabers, David. I never went to Elgin Academy.
Right, I do beg your pardon.
I went to Milnes High. We used to beat Elgin Academy 6-0, 6-1.
I stand corrected. What
5 years at Milnes High School.
What I meant to say was a teacher at Elgin Academy in Nairn County obviously was synonymous with the initial part of your career. And I'm talking, of course, of Innes MacDonald.
Innes MacDonald, that's right. Innes and, don't know if you remember, Geordie Welsh. Innes and George Welsh were George was the PE teacher at Gornston. And Innes, I'm not sure if Innes was head of PE or if he was English at Elgin Academy, but they both were Elgin City, manager and coach, and then moved on to Nairn County, who basically that was my first senior club, I think 1974, 75, before I went down to Man United. But I'd played for Bishop Mill United the year before, what's the question about?
Well, it was the fact that Innes MacDonald was the man that was synonymous with Nairn County. He was your first coach and mentor, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I had a couple of guys that, maybe some listeners would remember. A guy that was a legend in your little parish, down Mistaldrick, Fochabers. There's a guy called Jimmy Shanks, who was a plumber, and Jimmy used to run his own team and play friendlies, and I got kind of hooked in with Jimmy when I was about 10-year-old playing for his team. And then obviously I went to Elgin Boys Club when I was about 11. I used to thumb into Elgin from Mistaldrick, which is about 8 mile. And a guy, John Cameron, was the kind of head of the boys league and that, and he was a unbelievably kind of intelligent guy and coach, even though it was at boys level. But then obviously before I went away to professional football, I came under the wing of Innes, or Mac as we called him, and Geordie Welsh, who were two great characters.
We had Sandy Roy on one of our shows early on, and he was telling us that out at the Croft where Sandy's family stayed, that there'd be quite often five-a-side matches taking place, and there was a young Stephen Paterson who would sometimes put in an appearance there. Is that right?
We used to play Sandy Roy and his brothers. I think it was 2, 3, maybe 4 brothers, lived in a wee croft just about on the outskirts of Mistaldrick. When I was a young lad, we had the main playing park, which everybody, all the farming boys, etc., would gather every summer night and play. But Sandy had a lovely little pitch that obviously we improvised, and the 2 goals were actually pig houses, the little houses that pigs made in. And that was where we'd go up, maybe 4 or 5 of us, and take on the Roys. I think it was about 4 or 5 of them. And yeah, I remember that. It was way back in the early 60s it would have been, Sandy's other great claim to fame with me was, which I think is quite extraordinary, I never once got booked. Sorry, I only got once booked in my whole football career. Never got sent off, booked once, It was by Sandy Roy. In a game I get playing for Forest Mechanics, the year we won the league 85-86, up at Huntly, where Frank Kukowski literally would have broke my leg if it hadn't have been a strong piece of leg I had. And I basically retaliated by saying, "You effing whatever, ref, get a grip of him," where Sandy proceeded to throw a yellow card and book me for dissent. Frankie got away scot-free. So that's a wee bit of history for Sandy Roy. My one booking in my career, and was quite a fairly long and colourful career, abroad, etc. Only one booking, Sandy Roy. Sandy's a nice guy, by the way. I'm not. I hope he enjoys that little tale.
Pele, on the assumption that there are actually people left in this world that haven't read your book, for the benefit of the viewers, obviously, you get a chance to go to
remember that's a book. It was kind of, I've got an hour maybe we uncensored a wee bit more, a bit more fruity, But other clubs,
was it just Manchester United, or were there other clubs looking at a young Steve Paterson at the time?
Oh no, I mean, I was very fortunate. I mean, I was spotted. I played for the Scottish schoolboy under 18s when I was 15, down at Old Trafford, and obviously I came from a wee village and unknown. I wasn't kind of connected to any club, and I had a virtually every English, would now be Premier League club and Scottish clubs kind of on my trail. But the day I got back, I think Manchester, Tommy Docherty actually came up and with entourage for Manchester, so it obviously showed how much they wanted to get me. I remember he actually stayed at, you'll remember about Martin and Davy, the famous Rothes Glen Hotel, and Tommy Doc stayed there for a couple of nights and actually secured my signature there and then, although which was quite a wise thing, but I stayed on rather than going on as an apprentice at 16, I stayed on at Mullins High School, not Elgin Academy, to get my hires, which in the long term, which obviously now that I'm a kind of social worker, believe it or not, the world will shake when they hear that. But that proved to be quite a wise thing, because obviously I went on to Robert Gordon's college when I was later and got my social work qualifications and that, and obviously having kind of had my management career, it's been fine to kind of go into another side of working with young folk, which I really enjoy. So yeah, well, that's I think I've got to watch Martin and Davy, and I apologise, John and Natty, because I can speak all night. I'm a yap away and I've got too many tales, and yeah, that was my early kind of early days. One that makes me laugh, and John and Natty, and well, yourselves, Martin and Davy, although you're both keepers, but forgive me for that. But when I was a lad, I thought nothing of playing. I would play for the school. I'd play for the seniors in the morning, right, school team. I'd go and play for Nairn County in the afternoon, and I'd play for Jimmy Shanks on a Sunday. I'd do 3 games in a weekend. Absolutely never thought anything about it. Everybody now, they play too much and whatever. I mean, I'd have played football every day, night of the week if I could, I must say now my knees are paying the price, because I'm going to have to get 2 new knees in the next year or 2. But certainly I would never change that. And I do think, obviously, we're a different generation, but now the kind of science of football, etc. Yeah, you don't get me wrong, times have changed, but I mean, I remember John McGinley, for example. We used to meet him before we went to, we played together a short time at Nairn back in 1981, I think it was 92, and John would come up for William about 1:30, nip into the local chip shop, get a great big red pudding supper and pickled onions, scoff it, go at the game that changed and go and whip in 3 or 4 goals, you know. And obviously went into a great career, but different days, you know what I mean? Everything's, you know, a different time for us senior gentlemen, apart from, well, Natty would be the youngest, I'd say. Natty would be the baby.
It's a conversation we've had previously. I think Paul Lawson, Willie's son, was of mind that I think he'd spoken about. I think maybe it might have been Russell Anderson. One of his sons had been rested on the Friday night because he'd had a hard training session the previous Wednesday, and he just felt that that's, you know, it's, as you say, it's a different era. And although I wasn't a footballer, I didn't go to Elgin Academy either. I went to Spacehead High School, and we had a very good team. I've spoken about this before. Neil Fivey, Gordon Robertson, Nicky Walker, Derek Thompson. They all played for the school in the morning, and then played for their respective clubs. And after Paul Paterson was a 90-minute man at Rothes, had a great engine in him, but you'd have already had 80 minutes against Bucky High School earlier in the day. And there is, Natty's done quite a bit of coaching his time as well, so there would maybe arguments for oversaturation of a player, but there's a fine line, I think, and I think it's maybe gone slightly too far. But
I think like everything, you know, and obviously this is a kind of light-hearted football show. I mean, our generation, which was post, you know, Second World War, baby boomers, whatever, grew up in a different, you know, playing each side. The world's totally changed, and I have to say a lot, in my opinion, although I'm biased, I don't think it's for the better, you know, in terms of childhood and growing up. And, you know, I would never want to change the outdoor life that I led when I was, you know, growing up, you know what I mean? And I feel fortunate to have been in that era, and I don't really kind of envy a lot of the young people now, in the sense I think that, you know, there's a lot of mental health issues, things that, you know, in our day it was, you know, and I'm not dismissing it, but, you know, nobody had mental health, you know what I mean? You kind of just get on with it, pull your socks up. I'm not saying that's right, but, you know what I mean? Now there's almost an overemphasis, as if you've got to have issues of some kind or other, you know what I mean? It's a totally different society that we're now living in, unfortunately, at times, you know.
Well,
anyway, enough philosophising.
Dave's got a question for you.
No, can I just nip in 2 names you mentioned there, Pelly? One was Jimmy Shanks, and of course, Jimmy was the Cardiff City scout when you were a kid and I was a kid. And one of his biggest signings, he took a lot of folk down to Ninian Park. One of his biggest signings was another local guy, Donald Murray, centre half, had a great career at Cardiff City.
That's right, Donald Murray. Right, I think the same, was born and brought up in Duffus. Yeah. And he went down, I think, as a 15-year-old to Cardiff, which was kind of unheard of. And Donald obviously then went on to a really, I think he had a long, I think he might have spent all his career more or less with Cardiff City. Yeah. You know, he's one of these guys that played 500-600 games. Yeah. I think he ended up staying down that part of Wales. You know, but unfortunately, I don't think many followed after that. I think half the boys in my kind of area, parish, went down trial, but there was no many that I was down at Cardiff 3 or 4 times. But obviously, I never kind of I was offered to sign, but I didn't commit myself. But yeah, Jimmy was in our little neck of the woods. Jimmy Shanks was a legend because he was just so in love with football, and you know, he did that. He was a plumber by trade, but football was the love of his life, and he, you know, he gathered all the guys. We used to go in his plumbing van to away games, and, you know, with a lot of happy memories for Jimmy, you know.
He was a lovely, lovely man, Jimmy, as well, and another lovely man as well. I met at the end of last season, and he was there with his son, who used to be manager at Lossiemouth. I met him at Grant Park at Lossiemouth. His son is Gary, and the man you spoke about was George Wilson. George is well into his 90s now, but he was looking fit as a flea, and he was really enjoying the crack down at Grant Park at Lossiemouth.
Yeah, no, I know Gary for the
else is still in the go
for the past. So yeah, no, it's good to hear that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've got obviously so many memories for the formative years before me, you know, before I even hit 16. I'm sure John was obviously telling some great tales about his grandfather, and I love hearing his history like that. You know, I was actually I'm kind of currently trying to get into that family tree stuff, you know, my heritage, because I had relations that went and settled in America, and it's really fantastic digging up the stuff, you know. Just really, you know, unbelievable looking back. I mean, and finding stuff about your ancestors, basically, you know.
Yeah. Great stuff, Pel. I'll hand back to Martin.
Well, we'll hear all about your time at Man United in the next bit, but thanks very much for that, and we're glad that you managed to come back and join us.
That's if I don't run out of mere data.
Natty, you're looking very relaxed in the city there. Fortunately, you haven't fallen asleep quite yet. I want to speak to you about your playing career with the Blue Toon. Obviously, you've held a lot of roles over the years since then with the club, including the job that I now do, and you maybe need to come back and do that, because I've just seen my spelling on the script, and it's absolutely shocking. But you signed for Peterhead. Robbie Warner came along a wee bit later on, as you said. But a young boy playing amongst a team of men and winning trophies. It was a very successful start to your career.
Yeah, it was fantastic, Martin. Really enjoyed it. I'd won everything apart from the league by the age of 20. Nothing to do with me, or very little to do with me, more the quality of player Peterhead at the time. Before I go any further, I'd just like to say that I'm definitely with Stevie's school that guys should be allowed to play in their school teams, play on a Sunday. I just laugh when I hear of people playing 4 games in a week at 30-year-old, and people saying, "Oh, I think they're burned out." You know, it's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. But never mind. I was Peterhead when Colin Grant came to go. After Colin, it was Dennis Darcy and Joe Hartmer, Dave Smith, and then Jim Hamilton came to go after that. So I kind of who's who, and a lot of good managers in there. Dennis Darcy was the first one after Colin. Dennis was very much a blood and thunder man, and a great attitude to the game, a real winner. In fact, we won the League Cup at Borough Briggs. I was lucky enough to score the goal against Brewer Rangers, and it was the first senior trophy that Dennis had won. And he was, I've never seen a man so happy in my life that night at Borough Briggs. When Joe Hartmer came after that, I thought Joe could have gone on and been a really good manager. He was worse for a season. I think his wages maybe paid to having a second season, because you can imagine early on when Joe was in the goal, we'd got some fantastic crowds, but as the novelty wore off, it kind of dwindled away. But I really thought Joe could have been going on and being a good manager. I always enjoy speaking to Joe about the game. I like Joe as a manager. With Dave Smith, ex-Rangers, European Cup Winners' Cup winner. Dave Smith got us a few finals. And then after that, it was Jim Hamilton. Jim Hamilton, of course, is a great mate of mine. I followed him on to Keith. I think he was about 7 years at Peterhead, won absolutely everything. Just a great guy. I game of golf with him every week, and he hasn't changed over all these years, Hammy. He's very, what you say, he shuns the limelight. He wouldn't like to go in a lot of things. Earlier on this season, last season, I think it was the guys for East Fife for dying to get him doing. I think he scored the winning goal for East Fife at Ibrox on one occasion. So a few of the older guys just absolutely desperate to get him doing, but he's just near that type of lad. He just enjoys his wee game of golf at Peterhead. But a fantastic manager, probably the most successful manager Peterhead had in the Highland League. I'll get on about 3 occasions during the 80s for special times for me. First one was the Rothes Rovers game in 1987. Now we had 8,643 people at the game at Recreation Park. It was a great interest in the game because I'm sure that Rangers, Celtic and Aberdeen, the big guns were out. It was a year remember Adrian Sprott scored the goal for Hamilton against Rangers. But we had a lot of press interest. and we had a huge crowd at that game. And a good story for that on the Robbie Warner front is that the fire chief had said to Robbie before the game, 2,500 maximum, Mr. Warner. And on the night, they were absolutely flooding in, and this fire chief took a wee minute to get a hold of Robbie, but eventually he got him and he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Warner, I believe there are more than 2,500 people in the park just now." And Robbie's reply was, "Well, if you had him steady for a minute, I'll try and count them." And away he went.
Natty, can you remember, who did you play in the previous round that year?
We played East Stirling first round, a wee team called Rothes in the second round, and then Clyde in the third round. That's it, Martin.
You've got to get a Rothes connection in.
Rothes did fantastically well to get to the Scottish Cup that year.
To be fair,
But
the
of
game
course-
should never have been have been played.
No, it's
I can assure you, there were, believe it or not, on a Friday night before the game, there was 17 tons of sand put in the pitch.
I believe
I
that.
know, because I was the guy that ordered it.
Aye, I believe that.
And it was a guy Gald for Mark Inch was the referee, and it's the only time I think there's been a pitch inspection at a ground at 11:30 at night. But it was absolutely, I mean, it was farcical, but it was a lottery. But
There's one game we had against Queen's Park. It was cancelled quite a few times, not as much as was Inverness Thistle against, was it Falkirk or Stirling? But we'd one, it was much cancelled against Queen's Park. And I remember we played it on a Wednesday afternoon. And the funny thing about it was, of course, Big John Severite is a teacher. And there were a few hundred kids at the game on a Wednesday afternoon when they shouldn't have been. And I remember everybody getting wound up for a game, and Sivvy still speaking about the amount of kids that were there that shouldn't have been there. Trying to tell him to concentrate more on the game than his job as a school teacher. But Sivvy was the teacher to the end. So, no, the game against Rothes Rovers was absolutely fantastic. 3-3 at Peterhead, and unfortunately we got beat in the third game, played down at Gayfield. But I think there was in the region of 18,000 people saw the three games, which was a bit special. And it was great memories of the games. Also, with my testimonial that year, which was fantastic, I had a game against Celtic, and a young Charlie Christie made his debut for Celtic that day. Paddy Bonner played in goals. Stevie Fulton that went in the Hearts. It was mostly a reserve Celtic team, but it was a great game to have, and about 2,500 people there. So it was a very, very special game for myself. And of course, a team the year after 88, 89, it's you touched on earlier on, long awaited league title, especially for guys like myself and Sivvy, who had been bridesmaid quite a few times. The great Cali team in the late 70s, and of course a great team that John played in, the Keith side, that won the league 3 times. So it was great to win the league eventually. A lot of great players in that team. I've written them down, so I don't forget anybody. But with Beno, Jim Bain, I think many people could forget Beno. We've got Juggers was a goalkeeper, Jim Buchan. Scott Tate played after Jim Buchan won the league. With Big Sivvy, Kevin Walker, with Stevie Lennox, Brian Thompson, with Tim Donaldson, Ian Fraser, Dodge Stephen scored a lot of goals. Of course, Andy Smith that went on to make a career as a professional footballer, with Neil Burke, fantastic player, and Brian Thompson was in that team, although it was George Stephen. A lot of people think Brian scored a lot of goals that season, but it actually was George Stephen. Luggs went on to score a bag of goals for his season after, and we all know what he did at Huntly over the 5 years. A fantastic player, Brian. But it was great days, and lots and lots of stories to tell about a lot of these players the time we won the Highland League. If I go back to the Rothes Rovers game for a wee story, there was one time we had a big stuffed player, as it were, made by the prisoners at the time, and it was taken. It was in every single photo that we had, and at one point somebody says, could somebody move that big stupid thing out of the middle? And everybody went for big juggers, unfortunately. Ken. He wasn't very happy at that. He wasn't very happy. But he was fantastic through these games. And Dave, you're a goalkeeper, you'll know Jim Buchan. He went down to Dundee United actually with Alan Main, and he was picked before Alan Main. But he went on to tell Jim McLean that he was going back to Calgary and play in the summer or whatever it was. And Jim McLean gave him a telling off and asked him why he came down in the first place if he didn't want to dedicate himself totally to Dundee United. And it was after that that Alan Main signed for Dundee United. So I've no doubt at all that Juggers could have made it at a higher level. Fantastic goalkeeper. And picking a few players out of there, of course, Big Severite is just the finest. And he's got a reputation. He is an absolute gentleman. But I'll tell you what, Big John is some competitor. He's a fantastic competitor. And if you're in the trenches, he would be the first man you would have at your side. And a great lad as well, a great lad. Kevin Walker, again, was disappointed to lose Kevin. He went to Huntly, and we all know as well what he did at Huntly. I'm sure Pele will mention him at some point. And Stevie Lennox was in that team. Another one who eventually ended up with Pelly at Huntly as well. But a fantastic player. So played with a lot of good players. Very, very lucky to play with them, and delighted to win the league eventually. Through the 80s, there's quite a few cups as well. And once I knew I was coming on this tonight, I had a look at the cups, and it was amazing how many finals we got to. We won quite a few, but the amount of finals we got. And again, with Mr. Curran there, I think Keith Dunn was in 2 or 3 of them as well. So, but we got to an awful lot of finals, and it was fantastic days until 1990, and then Hammy went to Keith, and he persuaded me to go there with him to take my first steps into coaching. So that was it through the late 70s and 80s, Martin.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Thanks for sharing that with us. Natty, we'll come back to you on your Keith career in a wee while, but for the time being, thank you very much, and over to Dave.
Yeah, I was thinking Dodie Stephen. Was Dodie a wee bit short-sighted, Natty? I remember him wearing specs, and I don't think floodlights would have been very good for Dodie, if I remember rightly.
He's the only guy I knew that wore specs to put in his contact lenses. He couldn't see the contact lenses. You put the specs on, you see the contact lenses, and then just edge them off.
That sums up Dodie. He was a good player.
He was really good. But a super player, and what a season he had that season. He scored a lot of goals for it. And a very, very confident lad as well. A very, very confident lad. I remember one time when 2 or 3 cups, and it was around about April time, and he says, jump in my back, Natty, and I says, fit for it. And he says, we'll enter the Grand National, we'll win nothing else.
Brilliant. Pelly, before we go and talk about your travels all over the world and have boots will travel, basically, can we look at your Manchester United career? Who were some of the big names that were there as your teammates at Old Trafford, Pel?
Back in that days, it was kind of like I suppose like the home nations select. You know, a lot of Irish internationals, a lot of Scottish internationals, a lot of England internationals, some Welsh. You know what I mean? It was everybody was. I mean, names that will obviously you'll identify would be Joe Jordan, Gordon McLean, Lou Macari, Martin Buchan, to name a few. I mean, Sammy McElroy, Irish guys, Jimmy Nicholl. There was Stevie Coppell, England, Butch Wilkins, Ray Wilkins, the late Ray Wilkins, sadly. Greenough brothers. Just, kind of household names at that time, and as I say, I was fortunate enough to, be among that lads. You know, had a couple. You know, obviously as well as just being there 5 years. I think the first early, it was 1976. Went away. We did a world tour. And I actually roomed with Martin Buchan. You know, we played 3 games in America. I think in Dallas and Chicago and I think it was New York, and then we went to Vancouver, you know, and then went Bermuda I think, for a week, you know. So, you know, I saw a lot of the world with Man United, you know. Obviously went, you know, trips to abroad, you know. We obviously I was involved in the would have been the, I don't know if it was the UEFA Cup then, but playing Ajax, you know, playing Juventus. So, you know, I opened my eyes, a wee lad from a wee village. It was a great experience, and I was, you know, fortunate that I kind of got into the first team squad very, you know, about a year into my career there, and you know, I was part of the, I think, 3 FA Cup final squads, and obviously then I didn't. I think it was only 2 subs or whatever it was. I can't remember, but I was at the cup final in 1976. We lost against Southampton. I think the following year we beat Liverpool, I think, 77, and then lost again 1979 at Arsenal. So long ago, but again, you know, there's so many, you know, memories of, you know, the different, obviously all the players that, you know, I was involved with, you know, lots of them, I've got stories about me. I could speak all night, you know what I mean? So I look back now, and it's just a great, you know, to think that a wee laddie from Stall, you know, got, you know, wore a Man U jersey when he was 18 was, you know, I'm kind of proud of that. And I probably should have done better. I think I never really fulfilled my career there, a mixture of injuries, and, you know, I wasn't the most disciplined, as we all know, but, you know, I was grateful to spend five fantastic years down there, and I still go down there a lot. I've got a lot of friends that I made in my period there, and I love going back down to Manchester, you know.
After that 5 years, Pelly, you touched on the fact there was an injury you got, and that led to you moving across to Sheffield.
Well, I got injured near the end of the 1979-80 season. And Man United had offered me a 3-year deal, which I had realistically thought that I would probably, you know, go to a lesser team. You know, Sheffield United obviously now back in the Premier. I think they might have been Championship kind of level then. And I turned down the contract, Man U, because I wanted to get regular first team football. And I think both Burnley and Sheffield United agreed to pay, I think it was about 70 or 80,000, which would have been about 300 grand, 400 grand now. So I went to Sheffield United, but just the injury that I'd had, I mean, it was nothing really in today's terms, but I think I'd had a fracture in my ankle. It hadn't been sort of diagnosed, and I went back to pre-season at Sheffield United and broke down after a couple of weeks, and they basically said it, man, you know, I think they were due the first instalment of payment, and had said, well, wait a minute, you know, is this guy kind of sound, you know, is he carrying an injury that might, you know, threaten his career? And it got all very kind of messy, and I kind of feel a wee bit aggrieved then. I was actually kind of stuck in the middle, because both clubs, Man United, quite rightly in a way, said, well, you know, you made your decision, you're in our books, you're a Sheffield United player. Sheffield United said, no, you've sold us a dud. And it kind of it dragged on almost for about a year. In fact, the guy I actually who covered me, represented me, was Gordon Taylor, actually, who shows you how long ago. Gordon Taylor was PFA main guy then, and I was involved with the PFA, and they concluded that I wouldn't maybe be able to play at, you know, full level again. But it was all about it wouldn't have happened in this day and age. You know, it was a pretty straightforward injury, and you know, I did recover from it quite, you know, within about 6 months kind of thing. So, given you get your cruciate ones now, you're out for a season but it was disappointing. But you know, I'm not a guy kind of hard, you know, I don't sort of have grudges or you know, it was just the way it was. And, you know, I moved on, and I have to say I was kind of very, very lucky in that, you know, as compensation, I had, I think, about 4 or 5 years abroad that, you know, really, you know, gave me an education about the world, and, you know, places like Japan and Australia, Hong Kong, Norway, whatever. So, you know, I had a colourful career. I probably should have had a, you know, longer league career doing in England, but, you know, I actually spoke about this in a podcast recently with a guy, and I said that there's kind of parallels with my management career where I really didn't fulfil, obviously Aberdeen, you know, killed me through my own fault. And I never really, you know, although I did very well and did very well as a player, in both fronts, when I now reflect back, you know, as a kind of older man, I underachieved in both through my own, you know, I take full responsibility. But, you know, that to kind of counter that, I still had a very enjoyable time as a player and as a manager. I mean, I managed for 30 years now. You know, there's not many guys that probably managed well over 1,000 games. So I had a long shelf life, and you know, I've got more, you know, forgot more than I remember, if you know what I mean, because I've been involved with so many hundreds of players and people, and you know, when I look back, I just loved, and I really miss the social. I mean, I love the surprise, the social side. I love you know, the banter, the players, just everything about football, and you know, that's a big loss. I'm sure John, you know, Martin and Davey, yourself being involved, it's a great family, the football family, you know what I mean? And you know, I think I'll still, hopefully, I don't think I'll manage again, but I'd like to get involved in some capacity somewhere, you know, just for a wee bit selfish, but just to get out on a Saturday and you know, get back among people that I feel at home with, you know.
Yeah. Well, before you go out to Hong Kong, you came home and you're a season at Bucky Thistle. Can we talk about that briefly before you go to Hong Kong?
I know I didn't really a season at Bucky. I think I played a game or two. I actually went back to Nairn County in 1981 and played a half season there. That's when I met John McGinley. Me and John were both played up front together. I think we scored about 50 goals by Christmas, and I went away to Hong Kong, I think February, of that season, you know, into the second half of the season. And I'm pretty sure and say, I think John went away to New Zealand. He went out there for 3 or 4 years, you know. Obviously, I reconnected with him back when I was manager of Elgin City. But I think I had 1 or 2 games for Bucky. There was one time I had a game or two for Peterhead, Natty, I think.
That's right, yeah. You played with Joe Harper.
My recollection, I played in a derby game, I think, against Fraserburgh.
Yeah.
And I think I scored, because what I do recall, Joe was still playing, and he straddled me and fucking decked me. You know, he came running, and I scored, and 2 legs round me, and I landed on my back.
Yeah.
I think I did my back, and I think I have to sue Joe. But that was a game, like I say, I had a kind of few random games when I was floating about as a free agent, and yeah, I did play. I wore the hoops of Bucky, and I wore the Peterhead jersey. I wore the Elgin City jersey as a young lad as well. But Nairn was, I returned there in 1981 after my injury period at Man U, before I went to Hong Kong, and then obviously I went to Australia, and then I went, the last couple of years I went to Tokyo and Japan, you know, came back home, 1986.
I bet you're glad you went to Hong Kong then and not Hong Kong as it is now. It's a wee bit different now compared to what it was.
No. I mean, then it was obviously British colony, and it was, you know, I would say as many Brits as there was kind of, you know, Chinese in Hong Kong. But yeah, no, it was a very, very interesting place to stay. I actually shared a flat with four Scotsmen and played for Hong Kong Rangers, you know, who were we never once, we used to train at 6, I think it was about 6:30 in the morning. God knows how I managed to get up, but we used to have to get out before the sun got hot and that, and I think we'd just be coming in some nights because we had a fairly hectic time. We're all young lads in our 20s, you know, and imagine 5 Scotsmen sharing a flat, you know what I mean? We ate out every night because there was no cooks among us, but some fantastic times there. I mean, I think I touched on that in the book that I was part of, and I mean things like getting envelopes after getting beat 3 or 4-0 by a club, and getting brown envelopes and 300-400 Hong Kong dollars, which we hadn't realised. At that time, you were only allowed 4 Europeans in the team, and the 7 others had to be Chinese. And basically, the Chinese guys had thrown the game. You know, they'd basically been bribed, and they got their money, and they gave the European guys their money as well. Although we were bollocks off to win the game, but that was the way Hong Kong was. It was pretty corrupted, you know, some of the places. But I have to say, I never refused the envelope.
Yeah. Allegedly.
Yeah.
A former teammate of mine, a pal of mine, who's now first team coach at Sheffield Wednesday, a chap called Lee Bullen, was out in Hong Kong.
Yeah. I remember. It was a lot. Yeah. It was a great place for people that had kind of either started their career maybe and had got released by a club, or were coming at the end of their career. I remember the great Tommy Hutchison. Remember him?
Yeah.
He came out and played. I think with Bulova, one of the top teams. I actually played for the Hong Kong Select one game. We played against Celtic, I remember, and Celtic beat us 5-1. But Tommy Hutchison was playing in that game, and Tommy played till he was at 46, I think. He was a real legend, you know, a player. I mean, I think he played English, I think, like lower league till he was well in his 40s. Tommy Hutch, you know.
Yeah, Martin.
Did Derek Johnston finish his career in Hong Kong? Am I right in saying that?
Could well have. There was lots of kind of Scots guys came out certainly to Hong Kong Rangers, because it was a Glaswegian. It was a kind of founder and ran the club there, and there was a lot of Scots players, you know. The money was good. It was all tax free, and obviously you had your bribe money coming in. You know what I mean? So, it was a mad play. I mean, we used to, not very clever, but we used to run it. You know, we used to do runners. We were out in Chinese restaurants and get chased by chefs with cleavers, and we had some time. We had some time in Hong Kong, absolute bonkers, but I came out alive anyway, so I'll tell the tale. But no, I enjoyed it. It was a very, very, very interesting wee chapter of my life, you know.
Yeah. And then the Doc came calling, and you went to join him for a couple of seasons over in Sydney. Yeah,
no, I only played really one year there. I went there about, I think it was early February, maybe 1983 till about December, when the season in Australia went. Then, you know, it was obviously the kind of winter in Australia, was your summer kind of thing. And I had a great time there. Particularly with the Doc. I mean, he was just, I met a couple of, you know, I made a great pal with a guy called Ricky Herbert, who played for New Zealand and went on to manage New Zealand. But just the banter and the crack with the Doc. I mean, most of our games away, we flew to instead. We went there with 2 or 3 games in Brisbane, with a couple of games in Adelaide, with about 5 games in Melbourne. So they were all, you know, you'd fly away maybe on a Saturday, because the games were generally a Sunday, and we'd train 3 nights a week. But just some of the carry on with the Doc in terms of just, you know, the laughs we had was just, you know, I would never laugh so much at a kind of football guy. He was very much like he is when he was doing his after dinner. The Doc, I mean, if you were in with him, you were great, but I mean, he was pretty ruthless as well, as I suppose you had to be then. But he was an amazing character, and you know, that year I spent in Sydney was fantastic. You know, some you know, great memories there. You know, and we won the Australian Cup as well, which was a great. We are kind of ending it there, and then I moved on to Tokyo in early '84. You know,
But before
which was
you went
again
to
another
before you went to
fantastic.
Tokyo, Pel, you came home and you'd some time with Forest Mechanics. Is that right?
No, I came home after. I had 2 years. I came back in '86. And I joined Forest just for the second half of the '85-'86 season, and I gave them obviously a wee bit of a wee hand to win their first ever league. I think Natty, you might have been. I think it was between Peterhead, Elgin City, and Cali and Forest Mechanics. It was a very tight
that's right.
championship race, and we nailed it in the last day. I remember beating Cali 2-0 at the old Mossett Park on a Friday night, and the place was filled to the rafters. I mean, it was just an amazing kind of a thing. But yeah, prior to that, I'd literally 2 years in Tokyo and playing for top team Yomiuri, which I think they're now called Tokyo Verdy or something, or Verdy Tokyo. I think they've changed their name. But again, that was the money was fantastic. The kind of lifestyle was fantastic. I mean, it was treated like a kind of movie star. I mean, I was doing bloody commercials for jeans that I couldn't get my arse into, like some doing chocolate. I don't know. I was like a kind of like a celeb there, and it was it was just an amazing lifestyle, for 2 years, and I would have stayed on longer. It was just unfortunate that the guy Rudi Gutendorf, who was a kind of famous German coach, he got the sack, and the Japanese had been top scorer there and would won the treble, the Japan League, the equivalent of the FA Cup, which was called the Emperor's Cup, and the League Cup, and had been top scorer. But because the German, he got the sack, and they decided that they would disband the Europeans, and they took on Brazilians after that. But we weren't allowed to sign for any other Japanese team because a team owned by Nissan Motors, they offered me a portion to sign, but legally I couldn't do it, so I had to come back to Scotland again. But to be fair, I was a bit homesick. I mean, I have to admit, I'm a Murray loon at heart, and always, whenever I've been away, whether Manchester or overseas, I've always kind of missed my home patch, to be honest with you, Murray, and so I always just accept my fate, and that was my fate then, so that was that. But great times and great memories.
Brilliant. Well, very shortly we'll touch on your career as manager of Elgin, of Huntley, and then
Are we going to be here all night?
We are. We're just over 3 hours
just
last
checking.
week. We might beat it this week. Back to you, Martin.
No, Pel. We'll all have been here all night. You've not been here all night.
Got my data back, I'm doing well. I'm getting back on that.
John,
I get my daughter to do everything on my phone. I'm doing great. I just learned to text about a month ago.
Brilliant. John, you've already spoken about the fantastic career that your grandfather had, albeit it came to your knowledge late in life. And you've already mentioned your father giving you one coaching tip at home. But he must have been a great influence. And for the benefit of the viewers, we gave him a wee teaser to say that your father was a former dandy. But you maybe would like to enlighten the viewers to your father's career.
Okay, well, he'd been known to you boys and everybody else as a goalie. He actually started as an inside left with Strathclyde Juniors. And then he moved into goals, signed for Queen's Park in 1948. And his first game for Queen's Park was ironically against the Dandies. He replaced the boy wonder, that was Ronnie Simpson. Yes, that Ronnie Simpson. Queen's Park won 3-1. My dad had a blinder. Ronnie Simpson couldn't get back into the team. Took the hump, asked for a transfer, and away he went. The rest is history. Dave Halliday was the manager of Dons at the time. He must have been impressed with my dad's performance. having been beat 3-1 by Queen's Park. My dad 6 weeks later. What interested me in looking into this stuff, and obviously my dad was an amateur at Queen's Park, and he signed for the Dons having turned down offers from Arsenal, Wolves and Blackpool. Now this came as a surprise to me, it might not to you boys, but the reason he turned them down is at that time there was a maximum wage in England, but not in Scotland. So you got more money signed for the Dons than he would have gone to any of these top clubs in England at that time, which is 1948.
How times have changed.
I bet, isn't it? It really has. I mean, it was a whole different scene, as I hope I'll explain, then compared to now, including who the top teams in Scotland were. But anyway, his debut for the Dons is an interesting one as well. Firstly, it was at Peterhead on Boxing Day. They played on Boxing Day in those days. It was in 1948. He was in Aberdeen and got a call at 7 o'clock that morning of the game, saying that the goalie, the message was Johnston, regular keeper, indisposed. Read into that what you will. Oh man, small boy to get from Aberdeen 7 in the morning down to Parkhead for 3 o'clock that afternoon, and he made it with 20 minutes to spare. He got a taxi for the station, got to Parkhead 20 minutes before the start of the game. He apparently again played a blinder. I'm getting all this from, he's got a scrapbook, which he didn't keep. His father's, my granddad Jock started it, and my mother kept it going. It's all this stuff's in there, and it's fascinating. He played a blinder and retained his place, and actually was widely credited in the press as being the main reason the Dons avoided relegation in the 48-49 season. He married my mum in 1950 and was playing for the Dons against Hearts at Peterhead 4 hours after the wedding. Amazing stuff, you know. Yeah, he became very active in the nascent SPU, Scottish Players Union. And indeed, he gave evidence on behalf of the players at the first ever court action. It was an action in the Scottish Industrial Court that the Scottish Players Union took against the Scottish League in 1950. And my dad gave evidence on behalf of the players, but he was very much involved in the Players Union. The point about the court action was in those days, they didn't, and there was no maximum wage in Scotland, but they didn't get paid during the closed season. So I suppose it's a bit like an employee. You can get your holidays, but we're not paying you. You don't get holiday pay, you know. So they didn't get paid in the closed seasons, and perhaps not unnaturally or understandably, the Scottish Players Union thought this was unfair and took them to the industrial court, as it was called. I suppose it's the same as an employment tribunal now, you know. My dad gave evidence from a player's perspective. He also told me this story. Now, you can believe it if you want, but he said the reason that I got involved was I wasn't getting paid during the closed season. It wasn't in my contract. I didn't know enough to get negotiated in my contract. But some boys were getting paid. And I want to name them. So he says, so I went to see Halliday. And I said, look, you're not paying me in the closed season. And Halliday says, well, you're not entitled to get paid in the closed season, Johnny. And my dad says, but you're paying. And it could have been Bobby Wishart. It could have been George Kelly. It could have been Jackie Hazard. It could have been, I want to name who it was. But you're paying him half his wages in the closed season. And he says that Halliday replied, but he's more valuable to the club than you are. My dad said, he in a closed season, he's I don't know. It could be. I don't know if that's true. Next story. So, where was I? Aye. So, the result of that case, players got paid in the closed season in Scotland, and my dad became chairman of the Scottish Players Union for a while. Again, it's shades of Grandad Jock and the Red Clyde Ciders and all that sort of stuff, you know. But they're
a common theme here.
As a common theme, absolutely. I mean, they're probably both turning in their grave about the lawyer, you know what I mean? He played regularly with the Dons. He said helped them avoid relegation, and then along came a certain Mr. Fred Martin. I don't think my dad endeared himself to the Dons with that involvement in the Players Union, if I'm perfectly frank with you. Especially it probably cost him money in terms of paying close season wages. So he lost his place to Fred Martin. The Dons had a deal with East Fife, and he was transferred to East Fife in 1951, which was just after I was born. People say, and have said to me, why East Fife? Because they think in today's terms. Well, again, the maximum wage argument came into it. The East Fife also agreed to let him complete his coaching badges. But when you look into it, there was no old firm domination then as we knew it. East Fife, it's like something from the Omen here. East Fife were regular league challengers, and they came close twice to winning it in the first 2 years. In the 3 post-war seasons, East Fife won the League Cup twice and were losing Scottish Cup finalists. Crowds were huge. There's loads of cash in the bank. Again, I'm getting all this from the press. And their playing staff was described by journalists as second to none in Scotland. In other words, they were top of the world and wanted to stay there. And actually, as an inducement to attract top players like my dad was at that time, they publicly stated before the season 50-51 that there would be maximum benefit to all players with 5 years service, and also an end of season bonus, win, lose or draw. That promise would come back to haunt them. With all that in mind, East Fife, signing for East Fife is probably a no-brainer. And in season 53-54, East Fife won the League Cup against Partick Thistle at Hampden. They won it 3-2. East Fife against Partick Thistle, think about that. And again, it reinforces the point I'm thinking about, the no old firm dominance in those days. The East Fife captain was one Jimmy Bonthron, who went on to manage Aberdeen, of course. And East Fife captain was Jimmy Bonthron, yes, and the manager was Scott Simon, who went on to manage Rangers. I've reread the reports, and there's a fantastic cameo reported. And David, you might appreciate what this means, but halfway through the first half, Moleman dislocated his finger. He ran off the park. The club doctor ran down from the stand. He realised what had happened. Put his finger back in and taped it up in about 3 minutes flat. And he was back in goals. I think Moleman also, he did about a John Wayne moment and says to the doc, just give me a bullet to bite, doc. So, I mean, he was back in goals and they won the game. They bred him tough in those days, I think, you know. So, as I say, those inducements came back to haunt East Fife, because after 5 years, Moleman did his 5 years, so he's looking for the maximum benefit, the bonuses. And there were players in the East Fife team who were entitled to all of that, all those goodies. East Fife reneged on the deal. I think, I don't know, but I think my old man had got the promises written into his contract. He was in quite a strong position. But a number of, 3 or 4 of those players caved in and re-signed. Moleman held out. I think because it was a contractual matter. It rumbled on, and Moleman got what he wanted at the end, which was a free transfer. And East Fife conceded that, because then you know what a free transfer means. He can negotiate his own signing on fees and all that stuff, terms and conditions. So he left on reasonably good terms after that. And I've read these press reports. The sympathies of the press were all with the players, not the club, because they'd come out publicly and said this, and then they've seen their reneging. So he, with promises of being able to use his coaching badges, he's now aged, well, 32, no, he's 32. And with promises of being able to use his coaching badges, he goes down to Shrewsbury on his own. Wife and me and my sister still up in Aberdeen, because it was a one-season contract. Going okay at Shrewsbury, and then was coming back to Aberdeen, got an offer he couldn't refuse, as he describes it to me, from Watford, signed for Watford. Again, using the coaching for extra money. Another season for Watford. I won't bore you with the detail of that. Reasonably successful seasons. And back he comes, his wife and 2 young kids. I call it the lure of the Highlands, because you came back in 1958 and he got a job as an engineer turner with CPT in Aberdeen, and took his place, Field of Dreams, Kynoch Park, Keith FC, where for the next 5 years he participated in one of the most successful years in Keith's history. Two qualifying cups, including the club's first qualifying cup, one Aberdeenshire Cup, and the big one, the club's first Highland League title, won in 1961-62. They also had a notable Scottish Cup victory in 1960 when they defeated Hamilton 3-0 at Kynoch Park. That was repeated some 20 years later by another JC. In his 5 seasons at Keith, he played 215 games and missed only 6 as a result of injury. He put that down to Jimmy Woodcock sorting out any centre forwards who even came near him. And his last game for the club was a 4-3 win against the Calais at Kynoch Park. He was aged 39. He'd intended to retire, and he should have retired, but his pal, one Peter Cameron, was I think top man at the Broch at the time, and he persuaded my dad to have one last season at the Broch. I have no details to share with you about that, other than one story he told me, which was February, midweek, freezing, Belsley Park, wind whistling about the Nether and all other regions. The Broch, the 40-year-old Broch goalie, is praying for full-time whistle. He looks down at his knees and finds that they're blue. And that was the last game for JC Senior. He retired immediately afterwards. I can tell you, he continued his association with Keith and his coaching as well. He was up in Orkney coaching. He coached schoolboys at Peterhead, which must have been like the prodigal's return for him. He trained and coached Aberdeen bass players for Keith. But I know he counted his 5 years at Keith as being the happiest of his football career. And having spent 9 years there myself, I know exactly why he thought that. That's it for JC Senior.
John, absolutely fascinating stuff. I have to confess, until such time we had made arrangements to invite you on the show, I didn't know about your dad's career.
Right.
So it's been a double whammy for me, because I've got somebody on the show tonight that I watched and admired as a youngster, and I'm not just saying it because you're here. And then to find out, you know, your dad had a fantastic career, and your grandfather. That's the stuff that you know, it's really fascinating. And Natty, I'll tell you, we've done a wee bit of research at Peterhead with former players, etc. With a similar kind of story where we've got a player who played for Peterhead and then went to Canada and ended up playing for the Canadian Olympic team and won the gold medal. So like you, the Canadian FA couldn't be more helpful. Etc. So fascinating stuff. We'll eventually get on to your Highland League career in the next slot, but for the time being, over to Dave.
John, sadly, I never saw your dad have a bad game against Rothes, unfortunately. Him and, as you say, the legend, it was Jimmy Woodcock. Rothes couldn't get anywhere near him. As you say, Woodcock stopped anyone messing with it bad at all. He was a great goalkeeper, John.
Thanks, David.
Natty, after nearly 14 seasons at Recreation Park, you also moved to Kynoch Park.
Yeah, that's right. In 1990, I think it was with Jim Hamilton, really. Jim moved on from Peterhead. George Adams took over, and I decided to go with Jim. I couldn't agree a contract with Peterhead at the time, and I just wanted to sign straight one-year contracts because of my job at the bank. I just wanted to be free every season. I'd always signed a one-year contract for the whole of that 14 years, so I was disappointed when I didn't get a contract I wanted, and Hammy gave me the contract, and obviously the lure I got with Jim to Keith was great, and that was me. I ended up at Keith in 1990.
Who were some of your teammates at Kynoch Park at that time then? Throw us a few names, Matty.
Well, Gibby, Neil Gibson, Thana was in goals. A fabulous player, Alan Leslie was there, guy got slick. Craig Yates was there, a good player. We ended up selling Yates or to Montrose, I think it was. He later came back, and I think, I'm not sure if he played in Stevie's team, but he played in the Huntley team. It did exceptionally well. With a guy, Malky Thompson, who's Alec McLeish's understudy, Peterhead. Malcolm went on, and he never really adjusted to 9-to-5 living, as it were. He'd been a footballer all his days. And Malky ended up with Alec McLeish at Motherwell and Hibs and whatever. He followed Alec as his assistant at a few different places. Keith Watt, Shaggy the Cadam, a very fit lad, very underrated player at Keith actually. He was at Keith a lot of years. And a young James Hamilton played with us as well before he went to Dundee. So James, I always call him James, I think, because I'm Jim, but of course his dad's always Jim to me. But young James went to Dundee with Jim Duffy and carved out a fantastic career for himself. I just heard a wee while ago that he got into the Hearts Hall of Fame. So good on James. He did very well for himself and got a great career. Also at the time, there's great guys in the committee, as John will probably tell you more about because he was there longer than I. But guys like Alec Rutherford, Sandy Stables, just an absolute legend. They just Keith, but in the Highland League, and Charlie Simpson, guys like that. Lots of guys. Ferry was in the go, Bamfy was in the go.
Yeah.
Just great guys, and would do anything for you. Would do anything for you. Always remember in the dressing room as well. I was always with it being in Speyside, there was always a nice list of malts that you could buy at very, very good prices. So it was a great club. Treated you really fantastic. Although I would say that Sandy was cut to the same cloth as Robbie Warner. You were never left wondering what Sandy was thinking, to be honest. And he came into a few dressing rooms and it told us fair and square exactly what he thought of our performance. But a great guy, and as I'm saying, great guy for the Highland League as well. So really enjoyed my time at Keith. And as I'm saying, it was great to see James Hamilton come through and forge a career for himself.
You mentioned Sandy Stables. I found out very early in my Highland League dealings that if Keith got beat, you never really questioned Sandy for about half an hour after the game. You let him stew a little bit and stayed well clear of Sandy if Keith had been beaten.
That's exactly right. I remember once making a fatal mistake. He came into the dressing room, he told Jim Hamilton what he thought, and he told the players what he thought. So when me being assistant manager, I thought I would stick up for them. So I very quickly stuck up for Hammy and the players, told them how hard they worked, and I was left with not a name at all. He cut my head off running about my knees, to be honest. And I ended up sitting in the corner with my hands together saying, "Okay, Sandy, certainly, Sandy."
But then after 3 seasons at Kynoch Park, you moved to, I suppose, the old enemy, the dark side, Belsley Park, to join Fraserburgh.
That's right. It got to the point, I was player assistant manager at Keith, and it got to the point for Hammy was leaving me at the team quite a bit. And Hammy liked me and he would have played me. I just didn't get the hint really that I was towards the end of my career. And then I'd spoken to Charlie Duncan, and Charlie says, if you're available, you'll get a game here. And I just wanted to play, and every person, including Hammy, he always advised me to play as long as I could. So I went to Fraserburgh with Charlie, and I'll tell you what an array of talent he had. We all know about Charlie over the years, but Marino Keith was there at the time, Paul Keith was there at the time, Scott Murray was just before he went away, Blake, he was there, fantastic player. His younger brother, very young boy at the time, Mulby, Ian Murray, fantastic player as well, fantastic young player. You had Jimmy Young and Alan Thompson, the centre defence, they were good stalwarts of the club. But the one special player at Fraserburgh, I thought, a lot of great players, but Michael Stephen to me was what a player he was. He was such a home bird and such a home loon that I didn't ken if he would have made it if he'd gone higher. I think if he'd any kind of adversity, he would have just wanted to get him to the broch. Okay? But what a footballer he was! What an amazing talent he was, Michael. So Charlie had a really good side there. I could see that they were gonna do really well.
Yeah. I remember being at a Broch golf outing at Strathleen, and Michael was playing in it. Billy Gordon, the goalkeeper, of course. You never mentioned Billy, but Billy was as well playing golf that day. And Andrew Stephen was caddying for Michael. Now Andrew didn't play golf, but he was caddying. He'd Michael's bag on his back, and we came to I think it was the 14th green, right by the clubhouse at Strathleen, before you cross the road. And Mike was having a putt, and Andrew was having a beer on the edge of the bunker. And all I remember seeing was Andrew going back like that with all the beer in his back into the bunker, and half a dozen cans exploding because he'd landed on there. It was a memory I'll never forget, Natty.
I think he got released after that, actually.
That's probably I mentioned Charlie Duncan. I've said often, and present company accepted, the best player I've seen in Highland League football in my time was Charlie Duncan. What's your thoughts on that, Natty?
I wouldn't disagree with you. Of course, I'm a great lover of Big John Siverite, you know, I mean, the best I saw, but Charlie was absolutely fantastic. I've never seen a player more confident in my life, and such a talented guy, could do anything with a ball, just has so much belief in himself as well, and that helped me early on in my career, because anytime I felt a bit down or was left out or something like that, just need to speak to Charlie Duncan for about a minute, and you felt like $1 million again. Okay? And you're better than anybody. Just a great lad. Still working with him to this day at Peterhead. He still helps me with the coaching. We do a lot of community coaching now. But Charlie's still a great guy. Still wants to play. I think Charlie must be 67, 68. And he still said to me that he could play amateur football. And you're going, Charlie, please dinner. But Charlie was still think he can play. He's
good stuff. Natty will go on and develop your career in junior football management, but back for the moment, back to Martin.
What's that? Sorry?
We'll look at your career in managing junior football clubs very shortly, but for the moment, I'll hand back to Martin.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Pelly, your first job in management is at Borough Briggs. You were player manager initially, is that right?
Yes, so it was 1988. That was kind of the era where it was quite fashionable. I think Graham Souness was player manager of Rangers, and player manager was a kind of novelty, a new thing, and that was my first calling. I'd never really, thought about management. I loved playing, and it just came about really. I was back living in Elgin, and I'd obviously done well at Forest, and they decided to hire me, which, we had a couple of great years there.
And then, of course, that the man who, and we've talked about chairman, we've talked about Sandy Stables, and we've talked about Robbie Warrender, and another chairman who had a slightly different style, but obviously has and remains, I'm sure, a great friend of yours. Was Forbes Shand.
Yeah, obviously Forbes is a very good friend of mine, and one guy sort of stood by me, in good times, bad times, and Yeah, we go back now. Met him in the toilets of the Mansion House at Highland League dinner in 1990, who were celebrating Elgin's success in Forbes, being Forbes. Basically tapped me up, and
which is always a nervous moment when you're getting tapped up in the toilet.
Well, basically, I think he was the only chance he got when he was being seen by other chairmen, and he basically said what my situation was at Elgin, and obviously I said, well, it was, things weren't really going too well, and were contract talks, and the rest's history, I suppose. Off I went to Huntley with Forbies, and no regrets there. I mean, great chairman to work with, and obviously became a great friend over the years. I've spent many a happy golf holiday in Spain in his villa, which is now sold, but Forbes, in terms of chairman, he's in the same brackets as Andy Stables and all the kind of gentlemen we've spoke about, a bit of a legend, in his own way. Riney Loon, but nobody shrewder than Forbes, and a great chairman to work for,
So when you arrive at Huntley, it's a rebuilding job that you've got in your hands.
Well, I actually went initially as a player because wee Joe was manager, but obviously Forbes had took me in as insurance, I'm guessing, because my playing days were kind of my best playing days were behind me by that time. But saying that, I still kind of, I'd been 32, but I'd pretty severe back problems. I'd been in a bad road accident and that. But it wasn't long before, I think I was maybe 5-6 months, maybe, and Joe obviously got the bullet, and I moved into the initially player manager role. But again, that, I think it lasted a year or two, maybe that. But I mean, I'd obviously as well, I don't think I need to speak much about being well documented. The 5 years I had at Huntley were fantastic, not just for me, but obviously for the history of the club. Really put the club on the map, in terms of building a dynasty there through the 90s. A bit like Keith did in the 70s. Similar. To the domination, so just been, very, very proud to have been part of that kind of 5 years, and loved my time at Huntley. I actually remember I was kind of crying when I left because I was so fond of the players and the people. The folk were just, the Gadgies, as they called themselves, the supporters were just like family. We all kind of celebrated together and that, and it was just a magic time at the club,
Who was the first player you brought in, Pel? Who's your first signing? Can you remember?
Was it you, Martin? Was it you? First player I signed. Do you know,
No.
Well, honestly, I can tell you my best signing probably.
Well, I was gonna say I was. That was the question I was going to ask you initially, but knowing you, I would have thought you maybe didn't want to single out anybody, but I'll ask a question.
No, I mean, I'm there one for, we've already mentioned, Natty said, sounds like I signed half of the Peterhead team. It was so powerful, in terms of back then, in terms of Stevie Lennox and Luggy and one or two others that Natty mentioned. But no, I'm very careful. I don't like mentioning players, individually, because, well, just as I don't want to kind of every player.
Put it this way, then, who would have
played under me has done great for me, and I'm my favourites.
Who was the biggest success
so many,
in your time?
There's so many. When you've been at, for example, I was 5 years at Huntley, and I had so many. I was 7.5 years in Inverness. I had so many. Even my 2 years at Elgin, and I'm generally very close with my players, and you've got to watch, I don't want to get a hiding for Eddie Copeland for saying he's not my best ever 11. You know what I mean?
Tell me this: any defining moments during that 5 year period? Was there any? The first title, obviously, would have been.
I mean, again, a great signing was Doug Roofy. Dougie was a free agent. I think he'd been player manager of Montrose. I think Willie Lawson, Willie had said to me, like, you know, word always, he's still looking to play. He was about 36 at the time, 37 maybe. And I remember getting him up. Here's this guy arrives up in a big, like, 500cc motorbike with all the leathers on, about fucking 6'8", you know, black helmet. And he came off the bike and shook my hand, about broke my hand, like, you know. What a gentleman, and an absolute, you know, fantastic guy. I mean, I felt a bit intimidated. Here's a lad, you know, a Gothenburg great, you know, legend coming to play for me at Huntly, but he was so humble and so just not, you know, never a, you know, kind of just one of the lads very quickly. And, you know, that's again, I'm sorry, I'm getting on with Dougie, but I mean, I've hundreds of players, you know, I wouldn't have liked to offend, you know, there's so many that I try not to kind of single out. Again, obviously I've mentioned Martin Stewart. Yeah, Martin was a fantastic player, a bit like John would have seen at Keith and Natty would have seen in his time, probably Peterhead, whatever, Keith, that Martin could have become a top Premier League player.
Am I right in saying?
No danger. I mean, he could have scored you know, Aberdeen, he could be a top player.
We've had Martin on the show a couple of times now. Am I correct in saying, and I didn't doubt him for a minute, but you actually signed Martin without seeing him. Is that right?
Yeah, I did so much. I knew Elgin were desperate to sign him as well. He was just, I think, 17 and big lad, 6'3", whatever. And obviously a Huntly loan. So I thought, well, you know, something they right when, you know, a laddie for the town is going away to Elgin. So yeah, I moved very quick when I got wind of him. But as I say, you know, the biggest compliment, and it's no exaggeration, Martin Stewart could have become a top Premier League goal scorer, undoubtedly. And, you know, all credit to him. You know, a modest, down-to-earth guy you'll never meet. Happy with his lot, you know, a joiner, builder, whatever. You know, great lad. You know, I had the pleasure to work with him a wee while when I came back Huntly. I offered to take him for Martin, you know, good money. No, Martin ain't interested. First signing I wanted to make it Inverness CT, Martin Stewart. No, that's how he's called, local loon, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But no, I had 5 fantastic years I'll never ever forget at Christie Park, and made some fantastic friends. And, you know, I'm just so glad. You know, one of my favourite memories as I grow older is reflecting back in these days, you know, and it's always great. I'm sure John and I is the same. It's fantastic when you get a get-together at a hospitality dinner or whatever, and I certainly didn't see enough of boys like Willie Lawson and all my old buddies, you know what I mean? And I aim to try and make a better effort, because I'm pretty poor on the communication. I'm not the best, and, you know, I love going up to Inverness. I love going to Huntly. I love going to Formartine. We've been not so much Aberdeen for obvious reasons, but you know, I just love being among football people, and you know, that's certainly not going to change now at my age. You know.
That's fantastic, Pelly. We'll hear more about your time at Inverness in a minute, but for now, over to you, Dave.
John, one of the biggest moments in your career, signing for the magical McKessick Park Wonders at Rothes in 1969, started 4 seasons at McKessick Park. It's a long time ago, but I imagine Jimmy Curran was probably the secretary at Rothes and probably the one that signed you.
He was. He was.
Yeah.
I think he was manager, actually.
Yeah, well, Jimmy was everything. He was a groundsman.
He was everything. That's right. I think Jim Richmond followed him. I think.
That's right.
Jim Curran.
Jimmy Richmond, of course, had he turned out to be manager just after you arrived, but Jimmy Richmond had a glittering career with Kilmarnock and St Johnstone as a full-time footballer, and he was sadly, Jimmy passed away last year, late on last year, but he was a nice man and a good player.
Yeah. Scottish League Cup.
Yeah.
Richmond won. But yeah. We parted not in the greatest of terms when I went to Keith, but yeah, I agree with everything you've said. But before, my memories are a bit vague, I've got to say. I can tell you name players, but which year, which what, I don't know. What I do remember is I was at Aberdeen University and had 3 trials under the sobriquet Newman, as you always were. You know, you get Newman. So, and I remember, I don't know how this came about, but I was the Rothes players, along with a lot of other Aberdeen-based Highland League players, travelled up by train, and you get dropped off at the various stations, and the same coming back in reverse. I was just a young student, first year, 18-year-old, and I was told that I take my boots and go at the bomb, as I call it, in the joint station, and I'd be looked after. So I remember getting down there nervous as hell. At the bomb, I didn't know anybody. You know, bustling station, tap on the shoulder, turn around, and there's Ali Shewan. Jesus, are you young Curran? I am. So somebody somewhere had got hold of Shewan to look after this young boy, you know. So Shewan took me on the train, proceeded to introduce me to Tubby Austin, Tommy McMillan. I could go through loads of them. I mean, guys that I had been paying to see a few weeks before in my hero worshipping mind. It was just fantastic. I'll never forget that, you know. Up to McKessick Park, the first of my 3 trials. Now, you've mentioned some of these boys before, but remember, this is 1969, 70. So these guys were probably at their peak at the time. First game, I don't know what the order, but I played against Keith, ironically, Elgin City, and Inverness CT. Now, if you think about the 3 right backs I'm talking about there, Keith is Dougie Gallagher.
Yes, ex-Rothes.
Yes, indeed. Elgin City, Jimmy Gerrard. Inverness CT, Alan Presley. Like, and I'm off the back of First Division amateurs, thinking I'm Jack the Lad, and I was reading their bad team. It was like, welcome to the Highland League, youngster. I think Curran signed me because I managed to come out of those 3 trial games, still 2 legs. that was the rationale. So that was me signing for Rothes as an amateur. And I should say there, Natty, is something you said rang bells with me. Every year, when I signed professional with Keith, I went for 1-year contracts. That's all I was interested in every time. Everybody else was going out and negotiate and signing on fees, etc. As long as I got that 1-year contract, because you get paid per game, wasn't per week. And as long as you pull, you're fine. Anyway, back to Rothes. David, I maybe look to you for inspiration, but did you follow Sandy Shand in goals at Rothes, or did you precede Sandy Shand?
I think I was after Sandy Shand, if I remember rightly. Yeah,
that's my recollection. Okay.
Yeah. I had a season at Rothes, then I went back to join the Decimals after that.
After that, you'd have won.
I went to Rothes and then the Decimals.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you'll remember some of these names then. I mean, Rothes didn't win anything when I was there, but while I was there, I scored a lot of goals, especially in the first season. Has got me a Scottish amateur national trial down at Boghead Park, Dumbarton, on a Tuesday night. But no, I don't know if I imagined this, but I'm pretty certain it's true. I didn't get a cap, but there were 2 inside forwards in the park that night, whether they were in my team or one was and one wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was K. Dalglish and R. Callaghan. That's Rolf Callaghan. Dalglish. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But I have no idea what happened to them. You know.
No, all I know is they couldn't lace your boots, John.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, David. So I'm an international trial when we were Rothes first season. And the other thing I fondly remember, and I'm very happy this happened, I got selected for the North to play against the East in and it's a testimonial match for the late great Chick Allen, who you may remember.
Yes. Yeah.
Pelly's legend. I remember driving up with Ian Cumming in Inverness Thistle to that match. The only thing I remember about the match is missing an up inside the 6-yard box. But it was an honour to play in that game. As the best players, I mean, they were all great players. Maybe getting a bit older, David, that's how I put it. But I really love, I mean, George Middleton, Jimmy Dalziel, Jimmy Hall, Willie Watt, ex-Don. Do you remember him?
Yes. Yeah.
A fantastic player, you know. Later on, Danny Fitzsimmons, Gordon Davidson. I was talking to Davy McKenzie at Fraser about this, who I must admit, Natty, I thought he was the youngest player in the Highland League, but I defer to you. Because Davy, I think, I was quite young, I was 18, and that Rothes team, I mean, there was boys about twice my age, you know, in it. But my first goal was against Fraserburgh at McKessick Park. We beat Fraserburgh 10-0, and it just happened to be David McKenzie's debut. But he was something like just short of 16, you know, and then you've got Natty. So I've got hugely fond memories of my time at Rothes. And later on, like Danny Fitzsimmons, I remember him coming centre, big battering ram, a centre forward. I should mention Jimmy Hogg, Hedger, ex-Don. He was left back, you know. So they're, you know, good players. And I'll tell you this. I mean, I was an amateur. Keith came calling. I think the last game for Rothes happened to be, I don't know, but it happened to be against Keith at Kynech Park. Again, Davy Bennett, again an ex-Don, was my direct opponent, and I had a great game. I remember that. And Keith came in for me before the start of next season. Now, if it had been any other team, including your Elgins and your Callies and all the rest of it, I would have stuck with Rothes. But the tie with Keith, given my old man and the sentimental, historical association, was too much. And I signed for Keith. Jimmy Richmond wasn't happy that I'd done that. But I mean, I was a free agent, and perhaps Jimmy should have understood why I went, and that was my position on it anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, but I had a great time at Rothes. I enjoyed it. And these guys looked after me very much so. It's what Natty's saying about the older boys. That's what happened. And I agree entirely. I think it was Natty that said it, or maybe Pelly. I mean, the Highland League is a family, and the players are part of that family. And I mean, I'll rave on about the Keith committee men, except you've mentioned them all already. But every club was the same in my day, and I would imagine it's exactly the same. And these boys worked their socks off. I have just absolutely the greatest admiration for them. Fantastic. And it was the same with Rothes. I mean, Jimmy Cannon, I loved him to bits. He was brilliant. And you're right, he did everything. He did everything, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's, as I think that some famous actors once said, that's all I've got to say about that.
But let's go on to your 9 magnificent series at Kynech Park, John. 3 of which league winning under Bobby Wilson, one of the most successful managers in Highland League football. When his son Barry on a few weeks ago, we've not got Bobby on yet, but maybe one day, you never know.
I hope so. I mean, I'll start with him if I may.
And Jesse.
Starting at the sorry.
And Jesse.
Yeah. I would never start with Jesse. Neither would Bobby. The boss, I mean, and luckily I never played under Pelly. So, but he, by far the best manager I played under, Bobby Wilson. Ably assisted in the years you're talking about, I've got to say, by Jimmy Wilson.
I'll tell you what, John. I'm going to cut you off there because I'm going a little bit into Martin's script here because he's going to touch on those magnificent years very shortly. I was the script again. I thought, oh, hey, did I get
is that you in trouble?
It is a wee bit.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It was fascinating hearing John naming all these Rothes players, many of whom I was only born in '64, so a lot of these are just names. And how fitting was it that while you were telling us your story, we actually heard Doug Rugby go past in his motorbike? Wasn't that fantastic? Natty, your first foray into management, Buckenhaven Hearts, would that be right?
Yeah, that's right.
A spell at Cruden Bay as well. Now I'm conscious of time, and Dave's desperate to get back to John.
Keep it short.
And well, what I'm saying is, we don't want Pelly to start encroaching onto his night shift. But yeah, we'd like to know about your time at the Herties, as are affectionately known in Peterhead, and at Cruden Bay.
No, it was a full circle for me back to Buckenhaven Hearts. It maybe was the heartstrings tugging a wee bit, because I went back there and they had no money at all. I didn't get paid at all. I got made a few offers for jobs, different places, but as I'm saying, my heart was in Buckenhaven Hearts because they gave me a start in the game. After, as I said, I made that 10-minute sortie with Peterhead. So I was back to Buckenhaven Hearts, and again, lots of guys there who have kept the club going for years and years. Pipey Buchan, Jimmy Cruz was in the team with me, and Jimmy was a great lad. He had been manager of the team as well. Now, 2 years there, near the most enjoyable, but really showed me the side of the game. And I was scrubbing the footballs. I was almost painting the goalposts in Vidor. So really back to basics, as it were. And I like to think that I gave him a couple of years back. After that, my good friend Gordon Bakery, who played with Keith and Cali and Fraserburgh, he was at Cruden Bay. So Gordon gave me a call, and again gave me the chance to keep playing and help him in the managing role at Cruden Bay. And that was very different. I was very successful because we got promotion to the Super League, it would be now, and we won the Morrison Trophy at Cruden Bay. Sad to see them not doing so well just now, but again, a good club with a lot of good committee guys there who put in a great shift for it. It is basically a wee village team and everything. So that was me at Cruden Bay. At that time, I started coaching a local team. My sons had got to ages about 7, 8 year old, and I was roped in to coach at local teams. And that then led me on to coach at boys club level. But I think we'll go on about that later. But no, really enjoyed it, especially at Cruden Bay. It was really good fun. And Gordon, I thought, could have gone on and managed at a higher level as well. Of course, his son Jamie is starting for Fraserburgh, really good player. But no, Gordon did a super job at Cruden Bay.
I mean, we've already mentioned all the hard work that happens behind the scenes at Highland League clubs, but at junior clubs as well, you know. And it worries me because whilst there's a lot of clubs have got sort of younger blood in it, an awful lot of clubs, it's the older guys who are keeping things running, etc. And unfortunately, some great junior teams have fell by the wayside. They've got an even tougher task, I think, sometimes. Because sometimes it doesn't have the same sort of box office attraction as Highland League games, and it's a tough old ask. And a lot of junior clubs are obviously based within, you know, quarter of a mile of their Highland League neighbours, or as in Peterhead, a senior club, and they're all scrabbling about for the same fans and the same money. So hats off to the junior teams as well. I think, you know, the people behind the scenes here do a phenomenal job in difficult circumstances.
You're right, Martin, and it gave me a lot of admiration for the people I'd worked with beforehand as well. As a young player, you just go, he's a guy who gets the boots, he's a guy who does that for me, he's a guy, the pitches are ready, everything's ready. Once you get involved in it, you really appreciate these guys, the lifeblood of the game, they really are. And lots of them are maybe guys who didn't become footballers themselves and just love the club and love the game. So a lot of admiration for him.
I think Dave Cormie kind of summed it up the other week there when he said it, when he went and made his debut for Cumminston, that he met the secretary, the groundsman, the guy who swept out the dressing room, the guy that washed the strips, the guy that organised the contracts, and the guy that pulled the pints of beer in the social club and did the cooking. And that guy was one Andy Bissett. He did a whole lot. And that really just sums up the junior ethos.
Well, I'll finish off with a wee story about Andy Bissett. Myself and Gordon Begbie, 14 or 15-year-old, were promising young players. And that was the first contract offer we got made, was Andy Bissett coming in. He says, £2 and a pound. And we says, what do you mean, 2 and a pound? He says, £2 for a win and a pound for a draw. He says, what happens if we get beat? He says, oh, you dare get nothing if you get beat, my lord. So that was our first introduction to a professional contract.
Brilliant, Natty. Thanks for that. Dave, back to you.
Pelly, I would say you're synonymous with your journey at Inverness, Caledonian, Thistle. Am I right in saying you come right in after Sergei Bertacha left, Pelly?
Yeah, I joined 1995. I think it was the second season. Sergei had went to Inverness Cali, and became the manager of the first debut season, 94-95. I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah.
And what would have been like League Two, and obviously he was dismissed, I think, or moved on at the end of that year, and I had just won the league with Huntley in 94-95, and they came in and agreed compensation with Huntley to take me up to Inverness, and again the rest is history really. It was actually quite, I'd have liked to have stayed longer at Huntley, but it was quite a timely move in terms of I'd kind of won all the cups and the leagues at Huntley, and it was a new challenge, you know, a club that had just been, well, obviously merged, but that had quite high ambitions, you know, to move through the Scottish leagues, and you know, so it was a kind of ideal match again for myself, being a kind of, you know, a North boy as well, belonging, you know, to that. It was tied in nicely at the time. You know, albeit I was obviously I wasn't wanting to leave Huntley because we had a fantastic group of guys, but yeah, I went to there and I was under no illusions on my task. I was told, chairman then, Dougie McGilvery, was quite kind of forthright about the ambition to get to the Premier League, and that basically looking at maybe two seasons to get through each division, which kind of more or less achieved, you know, looking back, which was, you know, a great journey, you know. So yeah, I mean, I had, you know, again, I could talk all night about the different things about Inverness, but you know, I think everybody's you know, quite up to date with all the great things that happened there, and obviously I got, because of my success, that what inevitably happens, and I get kind of headhunted away from there, you know, which, you know, I was never really angling for. I was so very happy at Inverness, and genuinely wanted to be the person that had taken them through from the lowest league to the top league, but you know, I couldn't. My hands were a wee bit tied in terms of clubs that were coming in, and I'm not saying I was forced to move, but it was kind of pressure was a wee bit that I would be mad not to move to progress, but I was sad to leave, and I would have, you know, in hindsight, I would have liked to have seen the job through at the club, and you know, I'm the kind of guy that probably could have been at that club for about 20 years really, because you know, again, it was very similar to my previous experience at Huntley in the sense of a big family and great supporters and just happy times, you know, winning things, you know. Again, I've, you know, fantastic memories of my time at Inverness, you know.
Yeah, you knew Highland League football like the back of your hand, Pelly, and you took some good players from Highland League and gave them their chance with Cali Thistle. Yeah,
well, that was my main, you know, the first step to get out the old third division, League Two, was I felt that, you know, the players in the Highland League were easily good enough to win. You know, I'd actually managed a Highland League select then that's 94-95 season. Went down to England and beat the England kind of non-league select, which was mainly full of guys full-time kind of, big clubs that are now English League clubs. We beat them 4-3. So I was convinced that I could recruit for the Highland League to get the cream of them, basically like a Highland League select to get Inverness up and moving, and that was the case. I signed obviously like Ian Stewart. I went back to my old club. I got Brian Thompson, Marco De Barris, got Ian MacArthur, Mike Teasdale, Elgin. So it was kind of, well, it was literally a Highland League select to the first, to go get us out of the third division. And then after that, we did have to kind of recruit a bit more central belt to get out of this sort of league, next league up, which would be to get into the championship. See, now we felt we went kind of, half the players went full-time, half were part-time, which was quite hard going because, I had to train 2 nights a week still with some guys and afternoons with some others. But eventually went full-time. I think it was 98 when we got to the championship level, 1988, 89, I think, because that was just what was required to keep progressing. And by then I was, I recruited, some players. I remember a guy for Sweden, was it Sweden or Norway? I had a boy for Australia, America. We were kind of recruiting for English, guys that had been, basically I went for lads that had been freed by clubs that I felt had potential and that I could rebuild their confidence and, get them back playing. My best example, I suppose, was again is Barry Robson, who I signed as a young lad who'd made it at Rangers, and he was pretty low in confidence and esteem, etc. And kind of, I like to think had a good influence in rebuilding Barry, and I'm really proud of what he's achieved in the game in terms of obviously a great career, Celtic, Dundee United, Middlesbrough, and now a very respected coach at Aberdeen. But again, I don't like singling out because I've had so many, and it's almost kind of insulting to name Charlie Christie, Jimmy Calder, Barry Wilson. There's hundreds of guys that I'm grateful to and that I love working with, and I always enjoy seeing. So no, it's well documented. Obviously beat Celtic and had a fantastic 7.5 years in Inverness, and as I say, I would have remained there for as long as I was wanted. Had it not been for other clubs coming calling, I turned in Dundee United, and then I went to Aberdeen, and probably I shouldn't have now in hindsight, but that's just how it was, and the rest is history. And but I always look back with a lot of kind of feeling blessed that what I kind of achieved and what the folk I met along the way, and still occasionally meet fantastic folk, and I'm always grateful for that. So that's about my lot for Inverness type days,
Yeah. We can't leave the Cali Thistle days without going back to that memorable night. And I had the great pleasure of being there at Celtic Park that night, Pelly, when you created a big bit of history by knocking Celtic out of the cup. It was a magnificent night. It should have been on a Saturday, of course. It was postponed on the Saturday.
Yeah.
The wind damaged the stand, but it was an amazing night. And Murdo McLeod told me before the game it'll be 3-1. So I caught him after the game. I says, "You were right, Murdo, but you got the wrong club winning."
Yeah. Well, obviously that's the result. It's always now associated with Cali, and obviously the kind of the Sun headline that went global, Super Cali globalistic, and all of that is part of football kind of folklore. And any time Inverness Cali's mentioned, it's happened. They've gone on to achieve, in my book, bigger things since then. They've won the Scottish Cup. They've established themselves in the Premier League, although obviously they're going through a difficult period at a minute. But John Robertson and Barry Wilson's doing a tremendous job on a tight budget there. But that game will always, I can't avoid that. I always get kind of, obviously it was recently the 20-year anniversary. And it was a momentous victory, and one I'll never forget. But again, I've always maintained I wasn't all that shocked. I felt that Celtic were in transition. I felt that they had weaknesses. I felt they weren't the best at the back. I felt that I had an outstanding side that had no fear and had loads of character, loads of leaders, loads of winners, and I knew they wouldn't be overawed, and I knew they would thrive in the kind of environment of a 60,000 Parkhead, and genuinely, when we got in at half time, I genuinely believed that we could go on and we weren't going to sit on it. My line was, well, we can score more goals here. We can get it, and go out and finish the job. And, that was it. So, obviously I played my part, but the players were phenomenal, to a man. Each one of them played the game of their lives and thoroughly deserved it. It wasn't really a backs to the wall. It was well deserved victory. And, not did we know how global it would be, the next day or two. And, like I say, I get home to Garmouth about 3 days later, celebrating with a game on Saturday, which, surprise, we lost. But no, it was, one that will always be top up there, Fantastic.
Happy days, Pel. Thanks for sharing those memories
No,
with us. Back to Martin.
Sorry, boys, am I free to go now?
If you want to go, have you got something to go to? That's a yes. Pel.
No, I'm not being rude. I could speak on it. I'm really enjoying it, listening to the boys and that. I'm kind of...
I know you've got a job to do, Pel.
You know what I mean?
Can I ask you one more question, Pel? You mentioned earlier on your management days are probably over, but I know you can spot a player with your eyes shut. The fact is that your nephew, Kyle Macaulay, is Director of Football, I believe, at Brighton and Hove Albion.
Well, he's kind of top. He's the head of European scouting or something. He's got a cracking job, and
yeah,
I wouldn't mind being his assistant.
you could recommend a player to Kyle, I'm sure. You'd be a great scout, Pelly.
On another subject, which again didn't draw me back in the conversation, but there ain't the players seem to be up here that I'm going back to Duncan Shearer, John McGinley, Nicky Walker, certainly for Murray. I don't really see a lot of talent. I may be being disrespectful, but it doesn't seem to be the same lads going down to England or going to, you know what I'm saying? I can't really think the last decade of much, but no, I mean, hey, don't be surprised if I turn up as a kit man or a boot boy. Hey, I'm happy enough. As long as I get him a can of beer in the bus, that's the main thing. With the boys, give my cars maybe.
Pele, really,
all the bad things.
Really appreciate you making the effort to be here, because you had an 11th hour call out. So we really appreciate that. We'll be delighted to have you back on the show again, maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah, no. Thanks, lads, and great seeing you, John. I'll see you at hospitality with Willie and Frankie and all that.
I'm sure you will.
Eddie and the boys. And Natty, I'll catch you with Peterhead. Nice to see you.
Okay.
And nice to see you again, David.
Nice to see you, David.
Keep in touch.
Hey, guys.
Cheers. Cheers. Good night.
Bye now.
Legend.
John, as journalist Dave Edwards once said, John Curran, you had 9 wonderful years at Kyle Park. I make it you picked up 8 trophies along the way, if Wikipedia is to be found to be accurate. But I certainly remember as a schoolboy in my teens. Sorry about that. That fantastic period with Bobby Wilson, the 3 in a row, and believe it or not, I thumbed a lift for Rothes, Keith, because I had a ticket. I don't know how I managed to get a ticket. No idea how I got the ticket. But I thumbed a lift, and I got picked up by Derek Thompson's dad. Derek Thompson and his dad and his brother were going to the game, so I secured a lift for a place called Maggie Knockiter to get to Keith, and in doing so managed to convince them that they could go home by Rothes after the game. And I stood in the dyke and watched the whole game against Berwick Rangers that fantastic day. In your words, tell us about your time at Keith, but obviously we want to hear about that time under Bobby Wilson.
Well, I'll start with Bobby because he was just a great manager. I mean, Pelly's away, so I can say this without fear of paper, but Natty managed well. But I hope you understand when I say I endured 13 years of pre-match team talks with managers. And endured is a word for a lot of them. I only remember one sentence out of one of those team talks, and that was Bobby Wilson before we played Hamilton away, the day before, the match before you're talking about. And the line Bobby gave us just before we went to park against Hamilton was, the only difference between them and us is geography, which I thought was just pure dead brilliant. I'll put it that way. And that stuck in my mind. It's just great. It just, as a motivational thing. And that Hamilton team, by the way, was some team. They'd only been beaten once that season before they played us, and that was by Celtic in the semi-final of the League Cup. We were 3-0 up with 5 minutes to go. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Yeah, I think they underestimated us somewhat because they were a good team. There's Bobby Graham and the guy Jimmy Fairley, and then they scored twice in a minute. So it was squeaky bum time for the final five, if you see what I mean. But that was just a fantastic result, and we were favourites. We were favourites for that Berwick game. But I'll deal with the Berwick game. We were favourites. It's even though we got beat 2-1, it's right up there as one of the highlights of my career. There were almost 6,000 people in Kenneth Park, and there's only Keith's population is about 4,700. So it's the proportion, you know, it's fantastic. But what happened then was, I don't think it's the same now, but you know, you had a qualifying cup, you get the 4 semi-finalists qualifying for the Scottish Cup. And that was a big trophy to win, but key to get into the top 4. So then you're into the Scottish Cup draw. And what happened was the Highland League fans got behind whichever club was playing, you know, if you see what I mean. So they forsook their normal allegiances and got behind whoever clubs left. And I mean, that game against Berwick you're talking about, that was the 4th round. Obviously, you had to win to get into the 5th round, but there was an added incentive because if we'd won, the draw had been made and we'd have been playing Hibs, who had George Best amongst their number at that time. Yeah, so that would have been just fantastic. If you were there, you might accept what I'm going to say, which was, I think Keith were a better team, but Davy Smith won it for Berwick. The man had a wand of a left foot. He was just fantastic. So it's one of my fondest memories, that game, but one of my bitterest disappointments. And I think Kevin Bremner says exactly the same thing. He was a centre forward.
Was that a penalty, John?
I think it was. Others have different views, and having said that, I was pretty far away, being in the left wing, you know. I thought when he went down, I said, "Damn." That's what I said to myself immediately, you know. So here we go. Right, that's that game. I'll rattle through it. I think you're right. You've actually missed one trophy, but I'll come to that. Three successive Highland League Cups. 73, 74, 74, 75, 75, 76. And I'll pause there because I think that the team that one knows gets forgotten about because of the 3 leagues later. Now, the bulk of the league winning team played in that League Cup winning teams as well. But 3 in the trot, and it was a privilege for me to play with guys like Jim Bang Bang Maxwell. He was the left back before Brucey Martin. Keithy Rattray, the bustling Bowie, I mean, scored goals for fun. Ali Christie has been mentioned before. He was that. And Robbie Munro, the late Robbie Munro, died far I mean, engine that guy had, unbelievable. But they were a very, very good team. Dode Simmers, another one, centre forward. And as I say, I think their accomplishments get forgotten about because of us. The team that I also played in, I was looking at playing. The one you missed out, supporters Player of the Year, 1976. 2 Aberdeenshire Cups, 73, 74 and 79, 80. Top scorer 73, 74 and joint top scorer with Jim Guy in 77, 78. 2 career hat-tricks. I'll pause here and say, I'm rattling this off just because Charlie Simpson sent him through to me, by the way.
He's a fountain of knowledge, is Charlie Simpson.
He didn't exist, you'd have to invent him. He tells me I played in the Keith game with the club, with the first in Scotland to wear, first club in Scotland to wear sponsored shirts. Chivas Regal were the sponsors. And the match was against Nairn County apparently in January 1977. I am 12th in the club's all-time scorers list. But I wonder if I could have been higher up that list if it weren't for the sponsors. I don't know. Charlie, again, brilliant, uniquely tells me that my dad and me, or I, are the only father and son to win separate league titles as players. Which brings me to the greatest achievement, I suppose. I was privileged to play in a small part in that. That 3 Highland League titles in a row. 78, 79, 79, 80 and 80, 81. I have to say, all won when Calais, Thistle, Ross County, Elgin and Peterhead were still there. Forbes, if you're listening, and I know you will be, I mean no disrespect to Huntly and their 5 in a row achievement. That is a fantastic achievement and will not be repeated. You, Forbes, and your team, Huntly, are part of the Highland League's rich and fantastic history. You're right up there with Keith, in my opinion. You might now. Those 3, the 3 in a rowers. They trip off the tongue. Graham Mackay, Delgado, Wilson, Martin, Winton, Pettis, Duncan, O'Hara, Bremner, and hopefully me in there somewhere, as would be the likes of Dennis Bruce and Colin Keir. I mean, they were just a fantastic team to play in and a well-balanced team. I retired in 1982. You might say, I was just coming up to 32. Why? 32 is all for a winger, I think. Secondly, I'd been made partner in the firm. They were always supportive of my football. But pre-season especially, you know, trotting off at 4 o'clock to go up to Kynech Park or whatever. Well, the boys are getting to be fit in an hour, 4 hours in. It got to me. I was getting busier at work. My wife and I were thinking of starting a family. So there was a combination of things. And the final thing for me is I've always subscribed to the philosophy that you should leave when you're still wanted. I did that in my legal career, and Keith had offered to re-sign me, so I'm assuming they wanted me back. So I think I was the first in the 3 in a rowers to go, but that team broke up in sort of piecemeal fashion within a short time of me leaving. So I've absolutely no regrets. I loved my time in the Highland League, and I realised pretty early doors that I was playing in a league which was commensurate with and often stretched my abilities. I ended up with the best of both worlds in Hay. I was getting paid for doing something I'd been doing anyway, you know. There was no quarter asked or given on the park, but there was always time for a pint with the opposition afterwards, as Nat will confirm. I was privileged and proud to play with some really great players. I met great people, both players and committee men and those involved with clubs. And I'm not just talking about Keith throughout the Highland League. I mean, I'm great pals with Forbes Shan now, even though we do go at each other on occasion. I met great people, I established lifelong friendships and memories. And I'm always welcome back at Kynach Park. I think I'm a better player now than I ever was then. And they even wrote a poem about me when I left. Well, actually, the Murray Macar Charlie Simpson did. So just a fantastic time in my life.
John, that's a fascinating insight, and we'll maybe hear about that family you're planning to start when Dave comes back to you later on.
Oh, of course, absolutely, right.
Dave, over to you.
Natty, I know time is of the essence, and I think we've probably created a new record, but let's just look at Peterhead Boys Club, Peterhead Football Club, and let's encompass it all together, possibly.
Yeah, good idea.
You know, Peterhead has played a huge part of your life in football. You had a long time at the Boys Club after your career had ended, and then, of course, you're back in another capacity with Peterhead Football Club. Let's encompass it all together, Natty.
Yeah, well, the Boys Club was really down to my boys and the age they were. And again, John's right enough as it comes a point in life where the wife turns around and says, you've been enough trips to Inverness and Curran and places like that, so you've disappeared too often. You maybe should stay at home and look after your boys and their football career. So I had great fun with the Boys Club and took them right up through to Peterhead under-17s. Lots of good players come out, you know, carved great Highland League careers for themselves. Paul Young, Paul Lease, Lewis Davison, Paul Campbell, Scott Barber, Sean Butcher, Connor Scully, Cammy Bowden, Sean Carroll, all guys that came through, not through the whole Boys Club, but certainly the Peterhead under-17s. A few of them did come right through the Boys Club. So it was great fun working with the kids and everything. And Peterhead, I must say that Pele was brilliant. I mean, I did under-21s when Pele was manager at Peterhead, and with Neil Cooper as well. So it was fantastic days, fantastic days. I will tell you a little story. I know we're short of time, but about Neil Cooper, the late Neil Cooper and great Neil Cooper, was one time when I had an under-17 player, I said to him, "Had a good weekend?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I hope you're behaving on Saturday." And he says, "Yeah, I got home at about 11 o'clock and Neil Cooper was in the city with my ma." So I will tell you that they weren't getting up to anything untoward, but that was Tatty Cooper for you. He was quite a character. But no, we great fun taking all the kids through a lot of them, as I'm saying, carved out great Highland League careers for themselves. I went to work alongside for 2 years as manager of a junior team there, and it was great times alongside. We kept them in the Super League. And then it got to the point where I got a chance to retire for the bank, and Roger Morrison and Ian Grant, chairman and vice chairman of Peterhead, came a calling, and they wanted somebody as, I think the initial role, Martin, my apologies, maybe should be chief executive, but we made it general manager, and they wanted somebody full-time to do all the work at the club. So it was a great opportunity for me. Got the early retirement for the bank, and then moved on to work with Roger and Ian. Manager at the time, he was manager for 2011. I joined in 2013, I think it was Jim McInally. Absolutely the finest. Martin, you know, you work with him just now. Straight shooter, Jim, and a guy who's I've learned an awful lot from. And between the three of them, Roger Morrison, who's probably the best doer I've ever met in my life. He gets things done very well. Ian Grant was absolutely brilliant at the football side. You maybe remember Ian, John Curran from Keith days. Ian played for a few different teams, but he was brilliant for the football point of view, and he liaised with Jim. So it was brilliant days at Peterhead early on. In fact, we won the league 2013-14, and we got to the Peterhead Cup final in 2016. And I'm speaking about Rothes Rovers days when we had 8,600. Who would have believed that Peterhead could get 48,000 at Hampden in a final against Rangers? That's where these guys took the club. And I would, there's lots and lots of other people involved, but I would say Roger, Ian and Jim, that kind of trio, blended really well, got the right manager, that's for certain. And he's still there to this day. But I'd also say about Jim, and I've got to play big tribute to him, in that I've had, I think, 25 coaching camps at Peterhead since I went there, and Jim McInally has been at every single one. And there's not many first team managers, especially he lives in Rothes Ferry, but he comes up to every single one. So he's been brilliant for me, brilliant to work with. And from there, it proved to be too much, too many hours. And again, Martin Johnson, I'm sure you'll back me in this one, where I was quite happy to work 30, 40 hours a week, but it became 60 and 70. Enjoyable work because it was obviously involved in football, but I really wanted less hours than that after return for the bat, and I wanted to play a bit more golf again. Dave Edwards, you maybe appreciate that as well. I was looking to play a bit of golf. I did have a heart bypass in 2012, which gave me a real wake-up call and made me think, you know, there's more to life than working all these hours. So it was great that Martin Johnson became available at that time. And of course, Roger Morrison showed great loyalty to me and said, look, we'll get you a role at this club. I think Jim McInally and Ian were involved as well, and saying, we want to make sure that you stay at the club in some capacity. So I'm there as community liaison officer now, doing a lot of stuff in the community and hopefully giving back a little bit, doing a lot of coaching still, and really, really enjoying it. And I would just like to finish my bit. I've rattled through it, but I'd like to finish my bit by saying that the biggest thing in football, John Curran's touching it, Pelly's touching it, is the great people you meet and lifelong friends, not acquaintances or anything like that. We did a reunion for Rothes Rovers game not long ago, and within 5-10 minutes, the banter was going. It was just, you know, it just took off. The niceties are over after about 10 minutes. Such good friends and everything. I've met a lot of great people in football and really appreciate it. But thank you very much indeed for having me on tonight, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed it. Good seeing Pele again. I wondered who it was with the beard. I thought he was a mystery guest in Question of Sport or something like that. But never mind. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
You're a Peterhead legend, Natty. This is where I get my own back for that quip about the darts earlier in the programme. What's your impressions of the young whippersnapper that took over from you as general manager at Balmoor Stadium?
Well, I would say he's absolutely brilliant, made for the job. And I'm not patronising because I've been on the show now, so I can say what I like. But no, he's been absolutely brilliant. And it is a real job for a football nut. You know what I mean? Somebody who loves their football and loves being involved in it, loves speaking to managers, players, and what have you not, and secretaries and people for other clubs. And it's very, very time consuming, I can tell you that. And he's done a job fantastically well. We got promotion a couple of years ago. We stayed in League One now. And hopefully it'll be onward and upward. It's a very, very forward-looking club. And as I'm saying, to come from Highland League, to do what Peterhead have done, to get the Peterhead Cup final, to beat Rangers at Ibrox, another achievement, the trio that I spoke about, and especially Jim, to beat Hearts and Dundee. You know, if you'd said that to me in my Highland League days, I'd have probably got the guys in the white jackets out for you, you know what I mean? So it's brilliant what the club's done, and hopefully we can go onward and upward.
Thanks for that, Natty. And the last word to Mr. Curran. John, you must be immensely proud of your daughter Rebecca, carrying on the great tradition of the Curran legacy. She's probably, her program had started and finished while we're recording this, no doubt. Quite a bit either side. Her program, the BBC 9, the news programme on BBC Scotland. You must be delighted with how well she's done.
I love Rebecca to bits. I'm very proud of her, just as I'm proud of her sister, her older sister Rachel, who has just delivered me of my second grandchild, Amelia. The the reason I'm proud of him is it's not no careers, looks or anything like that. It's they've both got great natures, totally unlike mine, and most importantly, they've got a strong sense of family about them. They're great. But Rebecca's done very well. I think she's a natural. I might be considered to be a bit biased, which I am. I think she's a natural, and as we say in Aberdeen, she's got a good why about her. I think her and Martin Geisler on the 9 have got a good relationship, a broadcasting relationship. She got a great training at North Sound Radio. She then went to. I think she got a bit disillusioned there when things were more centralised as opposed to being a true local radio station. Happily, STV came along for her then. But our goal was always the BBC. I think all the broadcast journalists have that goal. The BBC is still the gem. So she had to apply for the BBC job. She got that, and then along came this new channel, the BBC Scotland channel, and she applied for that job, to co-anchor the 9, and I think she's doing very well. I better shut up because she's told me she's got to watch this, and I'll just don't embarrass me, Dad. You know.
I think that's maybe an ideal note to end it. John and Natty, we've loved it. It's been a great programme. You, Natty, and Pele, it's been wonderful. Back to my boss, Martin Johnson.
Dave, do you have a head scratcher for this week?
Well, I've been accused in the last few weeks of making it far too easy. So here's the head scratcher this week. There's only one player, one Highland League player, as far as we know, has won 6 Highland League titles in a row. Who is that player?
That's a head scratcher. That's a head scratcher. Gents, a wee bit of announcement tonight. As the football season is looming towards us in one shape or a form, we've had great deliberation, Dave and I, about how we're going to continue. Eventually, I'm going to have to go back to my day job properly. So what will be happening after this week is the show will be in the same format, but we're going to move to a Sunday night. We'll be premiering on a Sunday night instead of a Thursday. It's because we're conscious of the fact that there will be Scottish games to watch on TV in August, and despite the fact we've had some fantastic guests, with respect, I don't think we can compete with live Scottish football. So we're going to move to a Sunday night and continue as long as we can until such time the Scottish League 2 gets Scottish League 1, heaven forbid, Scottish League 1 gets back and running. So bear with us, folks, on that one. I've got to thank our guests once again, John Curran. It's been fantastic having you on the show. I think Rebecca will be immensely proud of how her dad performed tonight. To Pelly, who had to depart early before I think a group of youngsters were going to kidnap his telephone. And to my good friend Natty Porter, it's great to see you in good health, Natty. Next show, folks, our guests include a former Highland League player who is perhaps remembered for his epic miss at Peterhead. We've got a former Highland League footballer who is remembered probably for his epic winning goal at Ibrox. And we have a mystery guest, and it's such a big mystery, he doesn't even know he's going to be on the show yet. As always, folks, we ask you to stay safe, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you and good night.